Getting ready. Meeting to order. Welcome to Thursday, April 3rd meeting of the Capitola Planning Commission. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Welch.
Present.
Commissioner Graves.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Ruth.
Here.
Chairperson Ortiz.
Here. Please stand and salute the flag with me. Oh, where's the flag? They moved it. Excuse us.
We're all the other way.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Keeps you on your toes.
That was a change I understood.
Tonight's meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable TV Channel 8 and is being recorded to be replayed on the following Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. Meetings can also be viewed on the city's website, www.cityofcapitola.org. Tonight's technician is Victor Herman. As a reminder, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting, and please sign your name on the sheet at the podium for our record if you feel so inclined. Oral communications tonight. Are there any additions or deletions to the menu? To the menu. I've been on vacation. You'll have to excuse me. Are there any deletions or additions,
No, Madam
staff,
Chair.
commissioners? And so we will move on to public comments. Are there any folks here tonight who are here to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda? If so, now is your chance to come up and let us know what you're here for. Okay, then we'll move forward from that. We're on to commissioner comments. Commissioners? None? Staff?
No staff comments.
None now? All right, then. We'll go to the approval of the minutes of the March 6th Planning Commission meetings. Are there any additions or deletions? Revisions?
Move the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now is the time for the consent calendar, and these items are voted on in one vote unless someone pulls it for comment. And are there any commissioners who would like to pull any of these for comment? Is there anyone in the public that would like to pull anything, items A, 207 California Avenue, and B, 3120 Capitola Road, for comment? Okay. Do I have a
I'd
motion?
move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And now we move to the meat of tonight's agenda, our public hearings.
Madam Chairperson, I have to recluse myself on the first one.
Okay.
So I'll step out.
Thank you. Our first public hearing tonight is 1955 41st Avenue. It's an amendment to the master sign program at 1955 41st Avenue to allow logo signs up to 4 square feet in the CC Commercial Zoning District.
Okay.
Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Before you tonight, the current application is for an amendment to the master sign program for the plaza located at 1955 41st Avenue. The plaza is home to a mix of retail, restaurant, and personal service establishments, as well as the large department store Ross. A mix of food-oriented businesses are located on the east facade facing 41st Avenue, shown on the top photo. The PG&E suite is located on the south elevation, shown on the bottom photo. As you can see, there's been newer tenants on that face 41st Avenue, and the signs there are different from the signs on the bottom, which all comply with the master sign program for the location. The current master sign program for the plaza limits signs to the store name only, with 14-inch maximum individually illuminated channeled letters. The current request from the property owner is to allow 1 logo per tenant sign up to 4 square feet. And staff did receive an update to this application to also allow the bar under the PG&E sign. So that would also be included in the new in the amended master sign program. PG&E initiated the request for the logo sign. As seen in the image, PG&E would like to have their logo located next to the individually pan-channeled letters. PG&E has also requested that the white bar under the business name be considered. The original application included a request from the property owner to amend the master program to allow only the logo change. Since the packet was published last Friday, staff has received an additional request from the property owner to modify the sign program to allow the internally illuminated bar under the tenant name. By allowing this additional modification, each tenant within the plaza would be allowed to place an internally illuminated bar under a business name. The proposed change will bring a new look to the south elevation with a logo and white bar. Staff recommends the Planning Commission open the public hearing and approve the project application based on the conditions and findings for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, is the applicant here, and would you like to speak? Would you like to say anything on your behalf, sir? All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak about this? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing and we'll deliberate. Commissioners?
Yes, I would agree with the staff recommendation. I think it's a rather attractive sign. Definitely better than what's out there now.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm on board.
I'm on board too. The one thing I'd like to ask, you know, and staff and I talked a little bit about an item that's on the agenda coming up, and that is possibly in our ordinances or in conditions of approval talking about the actual number of lumens that are in signs, because I know we've had a couple signs put on 41st Avenue that have, as one council member says, can be seen from space. They're so lit up. So I wonder if we might apply the same thing we were talking about with the next one, if that is passed, to this as well.
Certainly, we can develop a standard for the luminosity of lights and then add it to this and any other future projects that involve lit signs.
I spoke with Michael Termini of Triad Electric, who does a lot of commercial lighting for signage and understands lighting, and he looked it up on their industry association, and they recommend 600 lumens per square foot as an adequate number that people will be able to actually see a sign well. And he recommends that there's a variation of minus or plus 100 lumens per square foot leeway, and I would feel comfortable with that. Does anybody have any comments about that or have any experience with that? Okay. All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval for the application for 1955 41st Avenue as listed with the findings.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Will someone round up Commissioner Graves?
See if he's still out.
He's probably out there yakking.
Sounds like I've been on vacation. Can't even talk.
Good work days and bad work days.
There you go.
No, no thanks. I would have got that for you.
The time.
He might have gone home for just a little bit. He only lives a block away.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, there he is. Came in the back door.
remarkably.
All right, then. Get started, and we are on item B, 1601 41st Avenue, conditional use permit, design permit, and variance, and, design permit, variance, and sign permit to allow expansion of existing Cinelux Theater located in the Community Commercial Zoning District. Staff report, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you is an application for a design permit, sign permit, conditional use permit, and variance. 1601 41st Avenue is located on the corner of 41st Avenue and Capitola Road and is home of Kings Plaza. The theater, shown on the screen with a star, is located in the southwest corner of Kings Plaza with the side elevation along 38th Avenue. The application is for an expansion of the theater into the adjacent Suite G, home of the former Capitola Book Cafe. Currently, there are 3 theaters within the Cinelux Theater. The expansion will allow 5 additional theaters for a total of 8 theaters. The applicant is also requesting a conditional use permit to serve alcohol on the site within a tapas and wine bar, represented on the screen in the green area. Outdoor seating was originally included in the application, but will not be associated with the dining in the theater. There are 680 parking spaces within Kings Plaza. The Capitola Code requires 841 spaces for the site, including the expansion of the theater. The code does not consider the mixed use nature of the center and the fluctuation on demand due to the different uses throughout the day. The city hired Kimley Horn and Associates to calculate parking demand for the mixed-use center. The study found that during the 85th percentile demand on a weekday would be 678 spaces and 620 spaces on the weekends. The study concluded that demand for parking can be fully contained on site. Exterior modifications to the commercial building require a design permit. As shown on the image on the screen, the applicant is proposing to remove the existing mansard roof and attach a false front corrugated metal siding with a new metal canopy. The wall finish will be stucco with a stone veneer base. LED lighting is proposed along the top of the corrugated metal siding over the entryway and along the outer edge of the new metal canopy. The side elevation shown on the screen shows the proposed steel canopy extending off the front facade of the building. Lighted bollards are proposed along the walkway. The outline of the architectural feature can be seen on the image as well. The application includes an architectural feature on the front facade of the building with a vertical emphasis, which are typical architectural elements of a theater design. The architectural feature is attached to a white steel frame that is anchored into the sidewalk through two stone bases. The feature connects seamlessly to the corrugated metal siding false front roof element. Portions of the architectural feature will be internally illuminated. The vertical Cinelux sign with 18-inch red lettering will be internally illuminated, as well as the red band. The applicant is requesting a variance for the height of the architectural feature. The zone height in the community commercial zone is 40 feet. As seen on the screen, the zone height cuts through the letter C in the vertical lettering of the Cinelux sign. The applicant is requesting a variance 10 feet beyond the zone height to 50 feet. The applicant is requesting a variance due to the theater being visually challenged from the 41st Avenue and Capitola Road. Staff agrees that the location of the theater is challenging, but has concerns due to the illumination beyond the 40-foot zone height. There is a section of the code for geographically constrained areas, but this section of code does not allow approval of signs over 16 feet in height. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a variance for the architectural feature with the illuminated sign. Within the additional 10-foot area, the internally illuminated red band extends to 47 feet, and the LED stripped lights extend the full height of the architectural feature to 50 feet. The proposed 50-foot architectural feature is located 260 feet from the nearest residence on 38th Avenue. Staff requested images from the applicant to show what the impacts of the additional height would be on the nearby residential development along 38th Avenue. This image is from 38th Avenue during the daylight hours, so you can see the feature. This image is from the same perspective on 38th Avenue at night. As seen on the screen, the internally illuminated red band and red lettering is visible. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission limit the sign lettering and the internal illumination of the architectural feature to the zone height of 40 feet. Staff added condition of approval number 9 to prohibit illumination beyond the 40-foot zone height. Two examples of signs in the area that were allowed additional height are the Target sign and the Whole Foods sign. Sign A on the Target sign is at 44 feet in height. The city has received previous complaints regarding the height and illumination of this sign from neighboring residents. The Whole Foods sign is 22 feet high with a metal canopy at 20 feet high. The applicant has also included improvements to the changeable copy sign along Capitola Road. The outline of the existing sign is shown in red on the screen. The sign will be modified to include the new branding of the Cinelux Theater and will decrease in size. The existing post will be wrapped with a stone base. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application, less the variance for additional height for the internally illuminated architectural feature, based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
No.
One, the 40-foot height limitation is, at least in my understanding, is for a structure, a building.
Yes.
And that conflicts with the sign ordinance, which only allows 16 feet. Is that correct?
So the sign ordinance for a wall sign does not have a limit for height, but when you look at the geographically challenged section, it limits it to 16 feet in height.
So this would be a variance above and beyond 16 feet. Is that correct, and not 40 feet?
It would be a variance beyond the 40 feet because a wall sign, if we were to consider this a wall sign, could go like the target sign, the full height of the wall.
So how was the determination made that that's a wall sign?
Because it's placed on a wall, it would be considered a wall sign. Although at first, they redesigned this sign. At first it was more of a monument sign detached from the building, but because they brought it back to the building and tied it into the architectural roof design.
I would just question that because the sign itself is not an exterior wall. It's a protrusion of an exterior wall, almost like a parapet kind of thing. So I'm not quite sure how it qualifies for the 40 feet.
I think from staff's perspective, you know, theaters and cinemas often have some kind of architectural feature to make it look prominent and stand out. And in this case, we thought it was appropriate to have that type of feature, at least up to the 40 feet with some kind of signage of, you know, that a theater is here to attract its visitors. The additional 10 feet beyond that, though, is, you know, really where we had trouble coming around with the findings.
So in your findings, where you recommend denial of the variance, what about no illumination beyond the 40 feet? Did you consider that?
That's the staff recommendation, is that you allow the architectural feature but not have it illuminated beyond the 40 feet portion.
Okay.
Any other questions? Can you refer back to the facade slide? There we go. I just want to double check and make sure. The dark blue section is not illuminated.
Correct.
The red section is.
Yes.
The horizontal pastel blue are not. They are.
They are.
Yeah, I don't think that was mentioned in the staff report, but
No.
those are as well. The Cinelux below in the oval is also illuminated.
Yes.
And then what is the illumination? I didn't catch the illumination on the eave, the fascia right there. Is that, how large is that, and what color will that be?
There is lighting. It's a strip of LED lights that go along. So the blue is not illuminated, but there is a strip of LED lights that goes along the front facade of the blue that will be illuminated up to the 50 feet.
So it's not the horizontal, aren't
And-
there lights all the way across the front on the
Go back.
facade?
Red, yeah.
Red?
Let me go back. So along the steel canopy,
Yeah.
there's LED lights along the front of the entire steel canopy, and then over the entryway for that one area that pops up, there's LED lights along the top of that over the Cinelux sign for the single section, and those are red.
All right.
I have one more question. So if you could go back to the rendering of the sign, that one works. So at the 40-foot level where you said it crosses right through the sea,
Mm-hmm.
so you're saying there'd be no your recommendation is no illumination beyond that point, above
Yes.
that point, right? So in order to modify the sign to adjust to that, just means what? Moving the letters down about 1 foot?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and changing the red,
Well,
right?
then-
The red part
Yeah.
is illuminated
Right.
all the way to the top. Is the, excuse me, is the red outlined or lit completely?
It's internally lit.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. This is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to public comment. Does a representative from the theater or the center wish to speak?
Hello, members of the Planning Commission. I'm George O. Jr. Thanks for spending the evening with us. And I'd like to say that I'm going to speak for the shopping center. We have Mr. Gunsky, who's going to speak for the theater, and then he has his technical team with him that can speak to what he's going to do and the sign.
Great,
Okay, so
thank you.
I'd like to say that my father built the first phase of the shopping center in 1962 and 1963. After I got out of the service and the Army, I built the second phase with him in 1972 and 1973. The second phase, we built the three-screen theater, and we leased it out to Kandare Company. Later on, it was leased out to United Artists, and then Star, Gary Culver, and now Paul Gunsky. We've had a lot of success with it. 1973 to now, we've had various changes, but we would like to really upgrade it now. We'd like to bring state-of-the-art screening, sound, seats, make it completely stadium seating. We've just done this in Scotts Valley. That's why we were so excited about it, because we saw what Mr. Gunsky and his team could do. We saw what the change did for his sales and traffic, and what it did for the shopping center, and what it did for the city. And in the end, we think it's a good thing for the entire area. In Scotts Valley, we put up a larger architectural element too. Theaters, we're all used to theaters having certain architectural elements, certain signage, certain neon. I'm thinking that Capitola, especially on 41st Avenue, could use some color and pizzazz and have a statement for the only theater in the city. When you go to downtown Santa Cruz, and the theaters there really help spark the life. And you look at the Del Mar Theater, and I was part of the small team that brought the Del Mar Theater back as a theater and kept that marquee. You can see that they're beautiful. The Santa Cruz 9, the Del Mar, they're really nice. I go down there and I see people standing on the sidewalk looking at the Del Mar, watching it blink. And I know that people on the Hill enjoy seeing that too. We are in the shopping center and in Capitola for the long term. As I say, we go back to 1962 and 1963. We ran the market there, where Orchard Supply is. We started the Capitola Book Cafe. I was the senior general partner when it started. We had the pizza restaurant right across the little parking strip there, our little road there. We started that. We put that in. We had 2 clothing stores there over the years. So we have a good feel for that shopping center. We completely agree with the parking study that there isn't enough parking there. We wouldn't do something to hurt the center, because I'm the 2nd generation. The 3rd generation members of it are behind me. They're really in charge now. I get to do the speaking, but they're doing the heavy lifting. I'm happy for that. And in the next couple of years, the 4th generation will be here. We're never going to sell that center. That's the word from my dad, and I'm going to say that to the next. So we want to keep improving it. This improvement will give a lot more choice to the people in Capitola and Mid-County to have 8 screens rather than 3. If you've been to Scotts Valley in the last month, you see how improved the quality of the presentation is, and now we'll have that with the very latest. I'd like to say that we're appreciative of city staff. City staff has treated us really well. They're really cooperative, especially Katie. We've been treated really, really well. The only variance that we asked for is that we are allowed to have the vision of Paul Gunsky and his team, the 50 feet, with lighting all the way up to the top. I'm thinking that this is an architectural element. It's also a thing of beauty. If you go downtown and you can imagine taking 10 foot off the Santa Cruz 9 sign or the Del Mar sign, I don't think it would help. I think that this will be a visual addition to Capitola. 41st Avenue, because of the way the ordinances are, is really bland, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has what they like. But I think that when you consider the length of 41st Avenue, when you consider the size of our shopping center, 95 or 98% of what you will see during the day or the night is from our shopping center. The way that the buildings are, the way that there are trees around, and very few residences, I'm thinking that, yeah, you might be able to see, if you look out your window and crane a certain way, that sign, but I think if you don't want to see it, I think it'll be hard to see. Okay. Our team, Paul Gunsky, I've met a lot of people in business. I travel, I love meeting business people. Paul is one of the best that I've seen. He's young and vigorous. He has guts. He's willing to invest. He takes old spaces like the Book Cafe space, and I really loved the Book Cafe. I'm probably one of the biggest readers and was their best customer. And but the time has gone. I don't know if we're going to have bookstores anymore. I hope we do. I mean, it's a great loss. But he's going to take that old space, and Paul is, and he's going to really transform it. He's going to make it really, really wonderful. And he's just done it, and we want him to do it in Capitola. So thank you for your consideration, and I'm going to introduce Paul Gunsky and hand off to him.
Thank you, Mr. Al.
Okay.
Yes, George, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
What's your vision? I mean, this is going to be a huge upgrade out there in that center. What's your vision for future upgrades to some of the storefronts and buildings out there and the parking lot and landscaping as such? What do you think this will do in terms of being a catalyst?
Well, I think it will be a catalyst. You know, that's a big shopping center, and I'm thinking that the upgrades are kind of like tenant driven, but over the years we've spent a lot of time and energy and money on changing the landscaping, bringing it up to ADA, lots, and we'll continue to do that. We want to continue doing that. The shake roof has to eventually be replaced. It's just not the thing anymore. And when I think about old shakes burning and things like that, but we want to continue doing that. All I can say is that we have our momentum going on this, and we will continue. We know that we have to upgrade and keep upgrading to keep it the center competitive, and we will do that.
Okay. Thanks, George.
Okay. Paul, you want to come up?
Hi,
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Gunsky, and I'm president with Cinelux Theaters, and it's very nice to be here in front of you this evening. And as George mentioned, it's been refreshing to work with Katie and the rest of the planning staff. They've been extremely responsive. We realize that this project is a little out of the norm. It's not a typical TI or a typical facade. It is different. It is a movie theater. And staff has been there every step of the way to answer our questions and to help us get through this process. So with that said, I did prepare a PowerPoint presentation. It's my first PowerPoint presentation, which I had a lot of help from my 12-year-old. So I have to put that out there as a warning. And I'm going to do my best not to read from the PowerPoint. I think we'll just use it as a guideline. So with that said, Katie, I don't know if you want to go ahead and start it up. Is that what you say with these things?
Is there music or something?
If you want it. It's
Yeah, we want the music. Yes, yes, we want the music.
you want to do it? Okay. All right, now. We thought it'd be fitting to put the
Where's the
MGM.
popcorn? Wait a
Yeah, and we thought we'd try to bring a little bit of Hollywood to tonight's. There we go. That is, I'm sorry, 20th Century Fox's introduction. With that said, you can go to the next slide. My name is Paul, as I've mentioned before. My company was founded by my father, Jack, in 1966. I've been working in the company since I was probably 10 or 12 years old, serving popcorn and working with projectors up until the point where we're at now. We're a local company based in Campbell. Currently, we have 7 theaters. They're all in small communities. It's quite a responsibility to be the theater owner in a small community because not only do you have the movie theater, but you have to be very responsive. A theater is a gathering place for everybody to come to. And we certainly treat each theater very, very individually. Both Scotts Valley and Capitola's 41st Avenue were acquired in 2009 with the Al family. It was a transition point for both theaters with the passing of Gary Culver, and the Al family has just been absolutely terrific to work with. Their vision and our vision have been just on the same path to take these theaters and take them into the next generation and to put the improvements which both theaters needed and 41st certainly needs. It is a daunting task when you take an older theater that was built, in this case, in the early 70s, and to bring it to current standards. It's a big job. There is no way that you can go in and piecemeal it. You really have to go in and leave nothing behind. When we're done, there really won't be anything within those 4 walls that will resemble what's there now. With that said, we'll go to the next slide. I love saying that. So I think I touched on this. We revitalize theaters, and every theater is going to have stadium seating. More recently, we're introducing VIP seating, which is wider seating. There's a space in between the seats for your popcorn, soda, or maybe a light food item. Digital projection, as well as a cafe and lounge. We introduced our first cafe and lounge in Scotts Valley. It's been up and going now for about a year. It's been a learning process for us, but we've had a lot of fun doing it, and the community has responded to it very, very nicely. With that concept, our guests are able to come in, order light food, beer or wine, and take it into their auditorium with them. We are the first theater in Santa Cruz County to do it. I'm sure there's going to be others besides us that will also be doing this as well. But this is a feature that we are going to be adding to most of our theaters where it makes sense, and certainly 41st it does. So that will be a part of it. What's pictured there is the cafe at Scotts Valley, as well as the little tower element as well. And this is just an example. I wanted to show you some before and afters. So this is a project that we did in Morgan Hill. This was a 6-screen theater, sloped floors, built in the early 80s, actually. That's the lobby on the upper left-hand portion, and that's the largest auditorium on the bottom right. In the course of our remodel there, we expanded it from 6 to 11 screens by expanding both out into the parking lot as well as into retail. We did the stadium seating retrofit, so that's the lobby now in the upper left, and that same auditorium on the lower right. And here at 41st, it'll be very similar. We're going to create a very high ceiling on the entryway, and it'll be stadium seating looking very similar to that. And this is just a photo of Scotts Valley. The picture on the left, I'm sure everybody recognizes, is the theater beforehand, and on the outside, we were able to create a very nice destination, a very visual appeal to bring people into the theater to make it look like a movie theater. And we also created an overhang so that the guests will not get wet while they're waiting to purchase their tickets. So that's Scotts Valley, which probably everybody's familiar with. This is, and I'll let Rob, our architect, speak in detail about this. The shaded area, as Katie pointed out earlier, that is the book cafe, and so that's the portion that we are expanding into. By the acquisition of that space, we're able to create additional auditoriums. We're moving the restrooms around completely and just get much better use of the space. But I will let Rob Henry speak to that after me. And then these are the renderings of what we propose for 41st. So on the lower left, that is your entryway as you would come in. Concessions will be to your right, and that's a stairway that's going to go to a mezzanine up above. And then on the upper right, that is the proposed cafe and lounge, which would be on the other side of the lobby. Basically, that's in the general area where the restrooms are right now.
And you walk in off the street and use the cafe and lounge, or do you have to actually be a ticket holder to?
You know, we welcome anybody that wants to come in, but typically I think 99.some-odd% are mainly our customers. Yeah. So this is a photo of the exterior, actually before we put our logo up on it. But there's what we have now is a very generic storefront. It doesn't look like a movie theater. It's hidden in the corner. And what we need to do is to create some excitement that can be seen from 41st, from the other end of the parking lot, that welcomes people in, that says, I'm just about to go into something very grandeur. We can't put these improvements on the inside without doing something to the outside to make it more inviting. And what we have proposed with the tower is something that is very typical. And I realize as we come before the Planning Commission, this is not typical. But for a movie theater, I was just thinking about this on the ride over tonight. I really can't think of any theater that has survived that doesn't have some large architectural tower element or something very prominent in front of it. And that's what we have proposed here. This is the view from 41st Avenue. As you can see, we are, I think the term is visually challenged. We're challenged in a lot of ways, but we're visually challenged here. And we really need something to stand out to say that we're here. I just think that photo speaks volumes. You can go to the next one. These are just, you'll recognize the Santa Cruz 9 in the upper left, the Del Mar right next to it. And then the, I believe it's Pleasant Hill, the Century Tower that you see there. And the Regal is, I believe that's Dublin. But these are very typical tower elements that go with a theater. And that's why we are here tonight requesting the variance, because we realize that movie theater towers really don't fit in typical planning codes, and that's why we're going through this process. Let's see, do we have another slide? Here we are. This is what we would like to construct, and what is the next slide? That's it. So here we are, and that's it as far as the PowerPoint goes. I feel very confident going into this. We have the support of the Al family. It's great to work with such a developer that has more confidence in the project than I do, and it's wonderful to work with. I have plenty of confidence in this, but I find myself getting enlightenment and energy from George and his family. So we look forward to this. We do have Rob Henry, who will speak and answer some very much more technical questions. And then we also have another gentleman, Harry Singh, that can address any particular questions about the actual sign itself. But before I leave, are there any questions I can answer? Yes.
I have one. I know staff didn't address this, but it appears these are like advertising panels in here. Are those addressed in the application?
I believe they're posters.
Yeah,
Total
they're one-sheet displays or poster displays is what they are. I believe we have, I want to say 8.
It was 6 from here.
I think there's a few more on the other side that aren't visible.
So were those addressed in the application?
They were not
Well,
addressed.
they
They are in the application. They were not addressed in the staff
Okay.
report.
It's a very vital part of the project to be able to display the movies that we're featuring. Very typical for a movie theater.
Other questions? No. All right, great. Thank you, Mr.
Great.
Grensky.
Thank you. With that said, Rob Henry, our architect, will be coming up to speak.
Almost sounds like a heartbeat.
Monitor, a heart monitor.
It does.
Sounds like
Good evening. Yes, my name is Rob Henry, Henry Architects. Just briefly, I'd let you know my background a little bit. We've been doing movie theaters now for 25 years, and I've been working with Paul for 10 or 12 anyway. It's been a while that we've been working together. Most of the pictures that you've seen are projects that we've done together, and it's just been a great pleasure working with him because he's been a great client and has produced some really nice things. I want to thank Katie for a really nice presentation. Most of the photographs that you're going to see from my presentation she's already talked about. So I can maybe clarify some issues or answer some questions about specific things, and then I have a few more additional slides that might show some other issues that we need to talk about. So I was going to kind of give a description of what we're doing with the building, but Katie pretty much already did it, and it's kind of self-evident that, you know, we're basically putting a whole new facade on this building, covering over the existing block with new stucco finishes and adding a stone base to the facade, and then a whole new element on the top, which would be a contemporary metal siding product. And in talking to Paul about what he wanted to accomplish, it was very evident that signage, attraction, visibility was a real key issue to this project. And so we discussed how we might go about doing that. And because there's a building directly across from the entry to this to the theater, we felt that we really needed to get this tower element that we wanted to incorporate into the design off to the end of the cinema so that it would be more visible from other parts of the center and hopefully from 41st and Capitola. So it would help give him the visibility that he was really looking for. We've talked about some of the lighting on that, and I think there was a question about the horizontal bands, whether they were lit or not, and what we would like is kind of an option on that, whether or not it's internally lit or whether we do it with an LED striping on each one of those elements. We have our signage guy here tonight who's just kind of gotten involved, and we haven't really had a chance to get pricing as to what the variable options would be on that, but we would like to have that as an option to either have it an internally lit horizontal bands or to go with LED lighting on those horizontal strips. The other signage, the Cinelux Cafe and Lounge, that's all internally lit as well. And as was mentioned, we do have a band of blue neon which runs up the vertical part of the tower. And then we have a strip across the top above the Cinelux Cafe Lounge sign. And also on the new edge of the canopy would be some LED stripes in addition. We're also going to be adding some bollards along the sidewalk. Right now, it's kind of a little bit scary because there's no real definition in the street and the sidewalk, so we felt that we should add some some lighted bollards along there just to give a little bit more of a definition and some safety factor to that edge. This plan shows several different viewpoints where I have some slides that we can look at and talk about to see it from different angles. And if we want to move on to the next slide. The floor plan, I can talk a little bit more about what we're intending to do there. The slide, the piece on the left is the main floor plan, and the lobby is in the middle. And of course, as you saw in the slides that Paul showed, we're putting in a whole new lobby, opening it up, and creating a much more dramatic and inviting environment. And we are adding this small wine bar, a cafe lounge element, so people can have a little bite to eat and have a drink of wine or beer before they go to the theater. The 5 new auditoriums we're going to be adding are generally small auditoriums, and they're going to have a kind of a nice, very luxury feel to them to kind of offset the fact that they're small auditoriums. We are replacing the existing restrooms that are there now, which are in horrible shape and have a terrible stench. We're going to tear those out and put in all new restrooms, and that'll be a very well-needed addition. As Paul mentioned, the seating is all going to be stadium seating. And have great sight lines and be a really well-needed change. The slide on the right is the mezzanine level, and just to show you, there's a stair that goes up to an element that's kind of right in the middle there that's kind of an overflow seating area, so that people can go upstairs and sit down and eat there as well. Next. We kind of already talked about this. Katie was discussing this some. What wasn't mentioned is that the metal siding that we're adding on the front of the building is going to be carried on down the 38th side of the building as well, so that the theme of that is creating an element across the 2 sides of the building. Okay. So I'm going to show some slides here that show what you actually see from various angles in the project. The picture on the right is the existing, looking right down the driveway. And way at the very far end is the theater, which you can't really tell it's there. The upper left sign is picture is a picture of the 50-foot tower. And the lower one is a picture of the 40-foot tower. And from this one particular angle, you'd have to say, well, there's not a whole lot of difference in visibility, that a 40-foot tower would probably be fine. 50-foot, obviously nicer. But if we look at another angle, you'll see that there is somewhat of a significant difference. If you just go a little bit further north on 41st Street, you'll see that the 50-foot tower, which is on the left, is somewhat visible over the tops of the trees. Even it's not very dominant, but it is visible. And if you look on the right, if there was a 40-foot tower, you'll see that there's pretty much no visibility at all. And I think as you move around the site, that condition is pretty much consistent throughout.
Where would that car be positioned? Where are you positioned?
It's on 41st Street, about I don't know, 100 feet north of the entry into the theater.
Just by IHOP?
There's, if you want to look at go back, there's on the floor plan, the site plan, there's a element that shows where that's at. Yes, if you look down there at the bottom, that view 2 is right there.
Got it. Thank you.
So if you move further north, then the building is blocking your view even more. So, and as you move around, you have this forest of trees, which basically obliterates anything unless it's, close to 50 feet tall.
So just to highlight, this will be view 3 and then view 4.
Okay, view 3, we've kind of already looked at and discussed somewhat. Keep in mind that this tower element that we're looking at, the back side of the tower where we have it lit, we would not have the back portion lit. We would have that blacked out so that most of what you would see from the south would be a dark image and not a lit image. Next one. The other thing that we haven't talked about, Katie presented one slide which we did as her request, looking at trying to fit our sign within the parameters of the existing sign. What we would actually like to do is something that's slightly different than that. If you look at the picture in the middle, there's a heavy dark line which represents the existing dimensions of the sign. And what we would like to do is have just a very small element that's sticking up 6.5 inches higher than what the existing one would be, so that we can carry on the theme from our proposed tower out to the sign element on the street. And we've reduced the volume of the sign from 100 square feet down to 77 square feet, and created a much more desirable, much nicer looking sign than what is there now. And we hope that this small addition of 6.5 inches higher than the existing sign would be something that could be accepted. That's pretty much all I've got to say. If you've got any questions, I can answer.
I have one question
Sure.
for you, and it deals with the marquee sign that you're putting on the east end of the building, in fact, right where the Books Cafe used to end.
Right.
I've looked at most of the marquee signs that you showed in your slides, including some marquee signs up in the Palo Alto area and stuff where they've renovated old theaters and the rest of it. I've never seen a marquee sign that's not over the entrance to the theater. And this is quite a departure. Have you done those in other places?
Actually, we have.
Where would one be that I might view it?
Livermore.
Livermore.
Right.
Not an area I like to go to, but
That's one that...
I'm not giving Livermore a bad name.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I can try to explain more of our thinking on that.
I know what the thinking is. I met with the Owls, third generation, and I expressed my views, and I will express them again when we get through with the public portion. I just wanted to know if there were other ones that I might view and see if I'm right after you get your approval.
Right.
And the theater in Livermore is the name?
Livermore Theater.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. One of the reasons why we're off to the side, in addition to the fact that we wanted more visibility, is that structurally trying to add a tower of that size, an element over the middle, was very problematic. So by having it off to the end, we had more space because the sidewalk is a little bit wider there, that we could actually have a place to put some structure to support this thing. And if we were to try to do it on top of the existing building, it would have been an extremely difficult structural problem, and been more expensive to try to accomplish, and plus the fact we would have been out of the view for most of the angles that you would see it from.
Any other comments?
No, not this time. I'll wait for the public portion.
All right, yes.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I just want to clarify on the architectural feature, the blue strip, LED strip along the front goes all the way to the top.
Yes.
So actually, the blue and the red are illuminated above the 40-foot level
Yes.
that we're talking about. Okay.
Just one strip of LED on that face, which
Okay.
would be visible from three sides, wouldn't be visible from the back side.
Okay. Is the back side of the red internally illuminated blacked out as well?
That's what we're blacking out, is the back side of the red.
Okay.
Yeah, so the red part would be illuminated on 3 sides, and the back side would be blacked out.
Okay. Do you have any experience with the internally lit portion of the sign up against LED strips, and which one's brighter?
You know what I think I would do is turn this over to our sign person who can really address that specifically.
Okay.
So, but I think we have one other, another owl that would like to come up and speak.
And before you get away from the podium, are there any other questions of the architect?
No.
Okay, thank you very much for your
Okay,
presentation.
so I think Benjamin Owl is going to... Oh, you're going to come later? Okay, I'm wrong. So we're going to have Harry forgot his last name, sorry. He's going to come up and talk about the signage.
Great.
Hi, my name is Harry Singh. I own a sign company, SJP Signs. We make electrical and non-electrical signs, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions?
No.
I'll ask the same question I just asked. Relative to lumens or brightness of the light, the LED strip on the front of the blue and the internally lit red part, can you comment on that?
So the internally illuminated signs that are LEDs, these are LED modules that typically have about 100 to 150 lumens per foot, but they have an acrylic sheet. So what you're looking at, the red is actually a red acrylic. One of the things these acrylics do is they diffuse the light by almost 90%. So if the LEDs inside are at 150 lumens per foot, the light that's coming out of that is 10% of that, so 15 lumens per foot. And so, these are not exposed LEDs. These are not LEDs that you would see, like, for instance, in office lighting, where you need bright light. For signs, it's important that the light is diffused, and so it's not pinching to the eye, it's not very bright, but it looks aesthetically, aesthetically better. And so pretty much all the internally illuminated signs that you see, and 99% of the signs we do these days are LED illuminated. They have acrylics on top, whether it's blue, whether it's red. The red individual letters, Cinelux, same kind of concept. These are LED illuminated. The modules are about 150 lumens per foot. But then the red acrylic will diffuse all that light, and what comes out is 10% of that.
The LED lighting to go on the canopy along the front of the building, will that also be diffused by some kind of plastics?
LEDs, typically LED tubings are, unlike neons, are diffused. So, because that's what creates the look of that, because these are LED modules. So you will, if you were to literally just expose the modules, you will see these dots. Which, so that's what the purpose of acrylics are, that they are enclosed in acrylics so that it diffuses and you see a continuous light on that.
That was a hard way of answering my question, but okay.
Can you adjust the brightness of these LEDs inside the acrylic?
They can be, and one of the things that I wanted to mention that I saw in one of the reports, that there is a requirement, there is a unit that's used to measure how bright something is, and that's foot candles. And so foot candle essentially is lumens per square foot. Right. Either way you look at it. So it's about, I think 50 is what is required. Everything that you're seeing, and I've done some calculations, would come out to about 19 to 20 foot candles. It's way, well within the 50 that's required with the elements that are shown here. And so, and we have a lot of leeway in adjusting the brightness. Different kinds of LEDs are available, different kinds of controllers are available to dim the lights up or down if we need to.
So 2 more questions. We have some LED strips on our house, actually, How many LEDs per foot?
Again, different manufacturers have different specs. You know, some are 2, some are 3 per foot. But typical would be the specs that are given out are that, you know, 1 foot would be on an average between 120 to 150. The ones which are used in the sign are about 120 to 150 lumens per foot. It doesn't matter how many modules there are on a single foot. That will be the kind of the output they will have.
Okay.
Any other questions? I just have a question about when you have, you know, the larger area that you have the sign, does it magnify the overall effect of the lumens with a larger sign getting more and more prominent, or? I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear, but I'm just wondering if the volume of the sign has anything to do with the perception of the
Right. So essentially, the way we decide how many LEDs to put is we will look at the size of the sign, and then we will, you know, kind of look at the area that we are trying to cover, and based on that, we decide, you know, do some calculations and decide how many LEDs we need to put in to evenly bright that area. Once that's done, then these acrylics are put on top, and like I said, the acrylics are 90 to sometimes 97% will diffuse those lights, and you will only see 3 to 8 to 9% of those light coming out, and then, you know, and that's what makes it, you know, it's really not the brightness, it's the aesthetics of it, or how the light is diffused. So if it's a red color, it'll bring out the red color and suppress all the other colors in the spectrum. That's kind of how it works.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Singh. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Who's next in this cavalcade of presenters? It is. All right, great. Then, are there any people in the public or anyone else who'd like to come up and talk to us about this proposal? This will be your last. I will close the public hearing after this, so this will be your last opportunity. Come on forward.
Hi. My name is Dawn Teal, and I'm the president of the Regional Artisans Association. We have a nonprofit local Santa Cruz County Arts Center in Scotts Valley in the Kings Village, directly across the parking lot from the Cinelux Theater that is in Scotts Valley. I'm just going to look at this real quick so I don't waste your time trying to ramble. We have been there we've been there for about 3 years, and we were there when they were upgrading the Cinelux Theater in Scotts Valley. And we basically are a place where local artists sell their work. And we noticed a serious increase in foot traffic and actually in sales in our location after the Cinelux Theater finished all of their upgrades and put in the cafe and the wine bar. And we have a lot more people from all over the county now actually come to our art center who came to the theater because it's the state-of-the-art theater, and they all want to go there, and they want to go to the wine bar, and they want to have all the great D-box seats and all the things that they have there. We also feel like the facade that they put in Scotts Valley really added an element of sort of almost, I want to say, retro destination. It really just, it's a gathering place anyway in Scotts Valley. Everybody goes to that theater all the time. And so it really sort of anchored that section from, you know, and you could see it from farther away as a central gathering place for our community. And so we don't see it as sort of a very big, bright, you know, just any old sign. It's not any old sign. It's sort of a marker of there's really something great for the community going on right here. And so we just wanted to let you know how great the Scotts Valley situation has been for us, to the point that actually we are about to, in a month, open up another nonprofit arts center in the Capitola Mall. So we're going to be coming to Capitola. And I'm not sure that would have happened if we hadn't seen sort of the increase and all the things that Cinelux Theater helped us do. We're kind of in the back of the shopping center, so we're not right where there's a lot of foot traffic, and it really brought a lot of people to us that we wouldn't have otherwise had.
You guys are really invisible back there. So.
Have you been there?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. And if you haven't, you should come. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please come on up forward. We'd love to hear from you.
My name is Vicki Howell. I'm a resident of Capitola. When I moved here back in about 95, 96, I didn't think Capitola had a theater. I would go into that shopping center as far as Orchard Supply, and that'd be it, because I didn't know back in that far corner there was a theater. I did see the sign, but to be honest with you, I thought it was defunct. So I feel that it's really important that they have a larger sign to indicate there is a theater back there. And with at the end of the building, it would be seen from Capitola Road as well as 41st, whereas if it was over the entrance or at the other end, it wouldn't be seen except from 38th. And if I remember the area, I don't remember any residential on 38th that was close. So I don't think they'll have the same problem as Target has with their sign. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear from a community member. Come on up.
Shy. My name is Darrell Turner. I retired from PG&E after 35 years, and I live in Santa Cruz. So you might be thinking, well, why am I here to talk to you tonight? And I would like to encourage you to allow this taller marquee, because I take my family to Scotts Valley to go to the theaters. And one of the reasons I do that, my grandkids and stuff, is generally we go in the afternoon and come out in the evening when it's dark, and it's going downtown can be, downtown Santa Cruz can be a little iffy in navigating both traffic and some of the folks that are lurking around that neighborhood. So I like going to Scotts Valley a lot. And frankly, coming to Capitola, it's kind of, coming out of the theater at night, it's kind of dark over there. And I'm kind of glad to hear about the added lighting along the street and things too. And having a well-lit area to go in and out of at nighttime, to me, is an important thing for safety consideration. And I have to agree with, after hearing everybody else talk about this, if you didn't know the theater was there, you wouldn't know there was a theater there. So I just would like to see you guys do everything you can to, 41st Avenue is an economic center of Santa Cruz County anyway, and I'd like to see everything you can do to continue that in Capitola. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good points. Who else? Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Karen Owl, and I'm one of the Owl family members. I've been a property manager on site at Kings Plaza for close to 30 years now. I did come to the presentation by David Greensfielder last month that the Chamber of Commerce put on. I know that some of you were there, and a couple of his points really rang true for this project. The first was visibility is key to vitality, and that signage must function. Cinelex in this location is tucked into the rear corner of a 13-acre parcel. There's buildings and trees blocking visibility, so that traditional theater tower element is key to this project. And the second was active retailing, and we're hoping that this project will be the start of the lifestyle type of center that will bring people in from a larger population area, and as a gathering point, and really increase the vitality of the center and the city. I know you've received letters of support from tenants. There are others here tonight. We're all very excited and looking forward to the first phase of the renovated theaters opening for the holiday 2014 season. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else tonight who would like to speak? I'm going to close the public hearing if I don't see anyone come forward. Okay, I will do so and ask the commissioners for their comments. Who'd like to start? Commissioner Graves?
I'd like to start, if you don't mind. As I mentioned earlier, I met with Karen and one of the other owls about this project. They really filled me in on exactly what they were planning to do. I expressed my concern with regards to the marquee sign, not because of its height, but because of its location. And if I had my druthers today, I would say, because they are moving into the old bookshop area, possibly the entrance to the theater should be directly under the marquee sign. But I'll wait to be proven wrong, and I'll go look at the Livermore one, and it certainly wouldn't stop me from voting for it. I didn't know that they had in their presentation tonight, however, the presentation of looking at the sign at the 50-foot level versus the 40-foot level. So I had a friend do a computer simulation of what 40 and 50, and you know, aesthetics are a matter of individual taste, but I personally don't think the idea of pushing it down, the present sign down to 40 feet really looks bulky, it looks small, it looks out of place. And then I also would like to call the attention to, this is the number of emails that I received with regards to support, not in favor of allowing the tenant and the occupant and the owners of the center to do something with the theaters. I'd like to make, though, a couple of comments, because one of our planning commissioners asked staff for some information on Target. That was Linda. And I read the information that was put back by staff, but the tallest sign on the Target building is not the one you showed her. The tallest sign on the Target building is the one that faces Sears. And it is a good 50 or 60 feet high. It's way up there. And they were trying to get some play out to the Capitola Avenue in a westbound, and we approved that. I was on the Planning Commission when we approved that. I would like to see if anybody supports my idea that the 50-foot sign is right, to put some language into the conditions tonight that if we received complaints with the amount of illumination to other areas, that we have some teeth to have the marquee sign turned off with the last seating, because theaters now seat for each film. I have been to Scotts Valley many times before they had their stadium seating and the rest of it. I just recently saw Monument Men there. It is a wonderful place to go. I agree with the last speaker. There are a couple other things that I'd like the city to get out of the approval of this project, no matter what the sign is, and that is the dumpster area behind the theater. The dumpster areas have no containment. In other words, they have no doors on either side. They have no roof on them, and they're unable to contain the cart type things. They do contain the dumpsters, but the carts are sitting out there 365 days a year, and people are going through them every night looking for plastic bottles or whatever, and they're getting all over the ground, the rest of it. So I'd like to see an improvement to that along with it. Let's see if I have any other comments here. I think that'll do it. I can support, not the staff, but the idea that a 50-foot sign, and I'll say it again, is an appropriate one. I don't like where it's placed on the building, but that's okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next, Commissioner? Commissioner Roop?
Okay, yeah, I'll go. You want to go, TJ?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I've wavered back and forth on the 50-foot versus 40-foot sign for the last week or so since we've got the staff report on this thing. And I've been waiting to hear an objection from who I thought would be the primary person to object. And no, that would be Steve Thomas, who wants to develop the senior citizen housing right across the street, which is no more than probably 100 feet from the theater sign. And there's been silence. Now, I don't know if that thing's ever going to get built out there, but
it's for sale.
I think if it does, we may experience the same kind of complaints we have experienced over the Target sign. But since he didn't object, I'm not going to object. The other thing I'd like to see is a condition that would apply to the to the movie posters that are along the front wall there, that they be limited to advertising of movies, upcoming movies, and nothing else. Not the cafe, not the wine bar, not the prices, not things like that, but simply just movies. And then to address the sign that was proposed tonight along Capitola Road, as opposed to the sign that we have in our plan, I prefer the one that's been proposed tonight. It's actually smaller, and I think it's much more attractive. That's my comments.
Thank you. TJ?
I think that's a great project. I'm excited for Capitola to have it. I also wavered back and forth over the sign only because of setting precedents about signs, really. In hearing the presentation tonight, and I think I could accept a 50-foot one. I'm familiar with the Livermore Theater, the Dublin Theater that was shown. That theater probably is the greatest architectural element in that whole shopping center, and it's a monstrosity compared to this. So I think I could support moving forward with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to kind of jump on the same bandwagon because I went back and forth on the height of the sign, and actually Ron's point made me feel a lot better because this sign is not that much higher than what we've approved before. And the high one that we approved before was not the one we had a problem with. So it's not the height that matters, it's how bright it is. Tonight's presentation, being able to see the perspective at 40 and 50, I had the same thoughts that Mick had with regards to it looking, not so good at 40, or maybe it was Ron that said that. But it's kind of frumpy at 40, and it really looks like a retro Art Deco architectural feature at 50. So I didn't ask the question, and I don't know if it's too late to ask the question, but I'm assuming there's no illumination on the facade going down 38th Avenue. And would just like for that to be a condition, that it not wrap around the building, that it stay on the front of the building. Can anybody?
Can the applicant just answer whether you had plans for it to wrap around? No.
No?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that this is going to be a unanimous vote. I think it's a vote for the Au family's history in Capitola, for our economic development here in Capitola, the one thing that we really, really need to value because of the quality of life it brings to us, having 41st Avenue be our goose that lays our golden egg daily. I think we can make findings for this as not a precedent setting because of the historic nature of theaters. One, theaters being traditionally this way. Two, their geographic challenges. And three, the extraordinary economic benefit above and beyond what any one business opening or changing could possibly do for 41st Avenue. This alone will bring way more business than I think even Target brought. I really believe that. And I just thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that, let's see, we did add some conditions, and that is we would like you to enclose your dumpsters. Please step forward if you have a problem with that. To make the signs only for movies, and to close down the sign lighting at the time of your last seating.
Only if there's complaints,
Only if there's complaints. And please step forward if you have something to add to any one of those.
And the sign, the Capitola Road sign, how do we address that?
I like the new design, personally.
I do too.
I agree.
And so we'll add
Yeah.
we'll just note that in
Okay.
whatever. Yes.
Yes, I'd just like a clarification on the dumpster issue. Would you be acceptable to having taller walls around those dumpsters?
Yes,
as
first of all,
opposed
it
to putting
doesn't hide the dumpsters, and the dumpsters get destroyed by the truck that throws the stuff over the top of the truck. But what I was really concerned is that the recycling bin and the carts do not fit in the dumpster area. So the wall in front of those dumpsters needs to be raised, needs to be accessed probably from one side only to really enclose them. I would prefer to see a metal covering over them. I mean, you're doing metal in the front, take a little back there and put it over the top of them.
Well, putting roofs over those things can be problematic just in terms of sanitation issues. They don't get cleaned out or washed out as frequently if they don't get rain going in there to help clean
Well,
things
the
out.
worst thing we could have is Capitola having rainwater getting into the dumpster area, because all our water in Capitola somehow makes it to Monterey Bay, and it's the marine sanctuary on the East Coast, West Coast that I'm most proud of. So I would say, you got the problem with cleaning it, but I think we get rid of the unsightliness of it now. And if you want my vote tonight, you'll do something with the dumpster areas. I'm very succinct.
I'm all in favor of raising the walls. I think that's absolutely appropriate. I'm just concerned about putting additional structure on the top of it.
I agree. I really don't think the garbage company's going to like it either.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get into that every couple of mornings or whatever.
They just roll it out either side now.
Well, yeah.
I watched them do it.
But with a roof on it, it might be a little more difficult. So
Absolutely, sure.
I would support it without
Do a
roof.
good job of hiding it.
Yeah.
We will do that.
You can work with staff. I'm sure you can find a way.
All right, thank you.
Any other issues that the family had with what we mentioned?
Well, we need to just get some more clarification as to what exactly.
Come on forward. We have thousands and thousands of people listening and watching at home.
Hi, Planning Commissioners. My name is Benjamin Au. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for coming out. I have a small picture on a phone of the dumpster area. If you would like me to pass it around, the challenge is there's a large tree right against the wall, so any type of roof would likely require the removal of the tree. And in terms of access for the garbage men, like you said, Gail, I think doing anything but just raising the wall would create access issues and make it very challenging for them to pick up the garbage. If we wanted to, for example, put a gate on it, Mr. Graves here, we've just experienced this at other properties that we have. They tend to get destroyed very quickly. So I'd be happy to pass this around if it would be helpful for you. But
I was out there this afternoon, and I believe that your picture is accurate. I think you can raise the wall to hide the dumpsters. You've heard the chair doesn't agree with me on the roof, so I'll go away with the roof.
Okay.
But I want to see also some enclosure of the 2 plastic carts at each one of the dumpsters there. Have you seen them?
Yeah, there's a picture right here.
Yeah.
So the only question is, I mean, at the expense of removing parking spaces, or?
No. Right? You can either elongate the wall at one end of the dumpster area, or you can do whatever you want, but enclose them. Or you can make a small enclosure next to the building. Your spaces do not allow the cars to go up and hit the building, and the dumpsters only are 28 inches in depth.
Well, I guess we'd need to talk to planning and building about where they would allow us to do that. It seems, based on the picture and my understanding, that the only way that we could achieve that is possibly if we removed the tree or did it in the landscaping strip adjacent to where the wall is currently.
No, the tree's on the outside of the wall.
Correct.
And I'm not suggesting that the wall be moved any farther to the south. I'm suggesting that it be either elongated east or west to incorporate hiding the 2 carts.
How about if it's okay with you,
I'll make a motion.
if we let staff do, and then maybe you can include Commissioner Graves if you feel there's any doubt that, and he can feel good about the fact that it's being done in your way.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd be
So
happy to work with you to come up
we'll
with
work
something
with
mutually
something.
acceptable.
Good. All right. Anyone else? Yeah.
I had one more question. So we're talking about the new sign, that's with the additional 6 inches on top? Okay.
And less width.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just a very quick comment about the tower. If there are concerns about it in the future, we're part of the community. We certainly don't have a problem with that. My only suggestion would be that if we could establish, maybe not at the last show time, but perhaps 15 minutes after the last show time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And the other suggestion that I'd like to pose is, if there were complaints, I would have to suspect they'd be coming from the west side. And there might be a way to design this so that we could shut down the west side and not the entire tower. And the reason I suggest that, there's a lot of teenagers, young people that get dropped off, and there's a lot of adults, parents that come to pick up their children late at night. And I just think it'd be much more inviting to have it still illuminated, looking like a movie theater, and not the dark area that it is now. And maybe we can accomplish both by dimming or darkening one side of it.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm not arguing with you, but as far as the children at night, if you're going to have the LED lights on the canopy, they aren't going to be in the dark. Those are not the ones I'm suggesting that had to be shut down. It's only if we have complaints on the marquee. And the only person, and Mick hit it earlier, the only person that might complain was the salvage yard across the street that's going to be a seniors project. And who knows if it'll ever be built, but I don't think you're going to have any problems. I don't think you're going to have any complaints, personally. But I'd like to see it rather than have to bring you back and deal with those complaints at that time, to have a mechanism within the conditions that would allow you to do some of the things you say. I have no problem with that.
Okay. But again, I still feel that the east side of the sign, or the tower, would be important to keep on. As the pickups come, it'd be nice to give them a destination night to go to.
I like that, because you've got one parent picking up that didn't drop off, and
Right.
you know, I think it's important. And I think your idea of the east or the west elevation lights going out only is a really good solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd love to fabricate a motion if I could.
Great.
And that would be that we approve the application for 1601 41st Avenue with the 3 conditions that we just articulated, which are, if complaints are received, then there's a condition that they'll turn off the west side illumination 15 minutes after the last seating. The dumpster containment will be improved to include the recycle bins and carts. And staff will work with them on the details for that enclosure. And the movie posters display on the front of the building will be limited to advertising of movies only. And the Capitola Road signage, it will be as presented this evening and not as in the staff report.
Okay. Does that work?
I can second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. We're thrilled about it. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to support our only theater in Capitola. I just wish you called it the Capitola Theater.
And we'll be looking forward to Oscar season.
All right.
It just get cold in here today.
Well, no, you know, the minute you said the word cold.
Okay.
We
just
need
kinda
to take
chill.
it
It's like-
outside if we got more.
Yeah. So, folks, those of you who are excited are congratulating one another. You need to go all the way outside, and you need to close that door because we have further business. Those of you in the back, please depart the chamber before you start talking. All right. So we'll go on to our last item on tonight's agenda, which is the general plan update. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the Planning Commission to consider the General Plan Update, the General Plan Update EIR, and to provide recommendations to the City Council regarding adoption of the General Plan. Issues related to floor area ratio limits, a requested land use designation change for the property at 412, 414 Bay Avenue, and any other recommendations the Commission would like to offer the Council. Tonight's presentation will be broken down into 5 parts. First, I'll provide a background information on the General Plan Update. Next, I'll provide an overview of the proposed framework and organization of the General Plan, followed by a summary of key changes proposed in the plan. I'll then present policy issues for the Planning Commission's consideration, and then we'll conclude the staff presentation with comments from David Early, Principal of PlaceWorks, formerly DC&E. California planning law requires every city and county in the state to adopt and maintain a general plan. The general plan is required to be a long-term, comprehensive plan to guide the physical development of the city. The general plan must include 7 mandatory elements: land use, circulation, open space, conservation, safety, noise, and housing. General plans may also include additional elements as desired by a specific jurisdiction. The typical planning horizon for a general plan is 20 years. Capitola adopted its first general plan in 1964, and then the city completed its first general plan update 10 years later in 1974, and then concluded its most recent update in 1989. The city embarked on its current update effort in the fall of 2010 to replace the 1989 general plan update, which is now over 24 years old. To help define the community's visions, values, and long-term goals, the City Council appointed an 11-member General Plan Advisory Committee to promote public participation and to represent the city's various neighborhoods and interests. Over the past 3+ years, the GPAC held 19 public meetings to help guide the General Plan update process. In addition to the GPAC meetings, the city also held several public workshops and study sessions, as well as multiple public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council. The GPAC held its final meeting on November 12, 2013, and offered a unanimous endorsement of the General Plan update. On November 21st, staff presented the General Plan and key policy issues to a special joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council. Although there was not complete consensus on all issues, the Planning Commission and City Council provided staff with clear policy direction on most issues and directed staff to initiate public review of the General Plan and EIR. The General Plan and EIR was circulated for a 60-day public review period between December 19th and February 19th. In total, 13 comment letters were received, including 5 from public agencies and 8 from members of the public. The vast majority of comments received were editorial in nature, and no significant issues were raised regarding the adequacy of the General Plan or the EIR. Responses to all comments received are included in your staff report packet. Staff has completed the final EIR for your consideration, and final revisions to the General Plan will be completed following City Council hearings. The primary objectives of the General Plan update are established goals, policies, and actions which embody Capitola's fundamental visions and values, to modernize and reorganize the document to bring it into compliance with current legal standards, and to make it more user-friendly. It also adds a sustainability focus, which is responsive to issues related to climate change and resource conservation, and to provide a balanced approach to community, environmental, and economic development interests. The General Plan update is founded on guiding principles which were developed through public workshops, stakeholder input, and the GPAC process. Guiding principles are broad vision and value statements which serve as the basis for underlying goals, policies, and actions in the General Plan. An example of a guiding principle in the General Plan update is to protect and enhance the quality of life in residential neighborhoods. Goals in the General Plan are statements of desired future conditions which are intended to complement and advance the underlying guiding principles. A goal in the General Plan update intended to promote protection and enhancement of residential neighborhoods is to ensure that new development respects the existing scale, density, and character of residential neighborhoods. General Plan goals are implemented by policies and actions. Policies are specific statements intended to guide land use decisions and represent the city's commitment to a particular topic or issue. An example of a policy in the General Plan intended to protect residential neighborhoods is to ensure the architectural character of new development complements the unique qualities of its neighborhood. Finally, actions implement the goals and policies of the General Plan and are measures or procedures intended to achieve General Plan goals. An example of a General Plan action item is to ensure that new development respects the character of residential neighborhoods is to develop residential design guidelines. The proposed General Plan includes updates to 6 of the 7 mandated elements and includes a new economic development chapter as an optional element. The 7th mandatory element, the housing element, is required by state law to be updated every 8 years and is therefore on a separate track from the General Plan. The housing element was last updated in 2010 and is due to be updated again by December 2015. The general plan also includes a new land use map and revised and consolidated land use designations. Key changes proposed by the general plan include placing increased emphasis on protection of residential neighborhoods, transportation alternatives and sustainable development practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, incorporation of goals for energy and water conservation, the provision of additional protections for historic and cultural resources, promoting maintenance and enhancement of parks, open spaces, and environmental resources, and establishment of appropriate floor area ratio limits. The general plan would not allow increased density in single-family residential neighborhoods and would largely maintain existing commercial intensity limits with the exception of the 41st Avenue corridor. Tonight, staff is requesting that the Planning Commission offer the City Council specific recommendations on two remaining policy issues: floor area ratio limits for commercial and mixed-use land use designations, and the land use designation for 412, 414 Bay Avenue. State planning law requires local agencies to include maximum development standards in their general plans. This is typically established through density for residential areas and floor area ratio for mixed-use, commercial, and industrial designations. Floor area ratio, as shown in this illustration, describes the relationship between the total building area and total lot area. For example, a floor area ratio of 0.5 would allow a single-story structure on 50% of its lot, or a two-story structure on 25% of its lot. Similarly, a one floor area ratio would allow a one-story structure to occupy the entire lot, or a two-story structure on 50% of its lot. The city's current general plan establishes a citywide 0.5 floor area ratio limit, with the exception of the village, which has no limit. The 0.5 floor area ratio limit is not reflective of actual on-the-ground built conditions and would be inconsistent with the city's goals to promote sustainable and economically beneficial infill development. It is important to keep in mind that floor area ratio limits in the general plan are not entitlements, but rather provide maximum building intensities that may be achieved if all other development standards are met and authorized by city decision makers. The city has a number of other controls to regulate building intensity, including zoning ordinance standards for height, setbacks, parking, landscaping, and open space, as well as design guidelines related to building form, mass, and articulation. In addition, all new commercial and mixed-use development in Capitola would be subject to discretionary review, which requires Planning Commission and/or City Council approval, with findings that proposed intensity would be in harmony with existing community character and compatible with neighboring land uses. To develop appropriate baseline floor area ratio limits, staff evaluated the existing built conditions of various Capitola neighborhoods. During the November meeting with the Planning Commission and City Council, there was considerable discussion regarding floor area ratio limits in the village and along 41st Avenue. This slide shows approximate floor area ratios of existing buildings in the village. As you can see, typical floor area ratios range from 1 to 2, depending on whether a site is developed with a 1 or 2-story structure. There are a few sites, such as the Mercantile, Quality Market, and David Ling Realty, that have lower floor area ratios, but this is largely because their sites also support surface parking lots. Based on existing built conditions and considering that first floor residential uses in the village are generally not allowed due to flood regulations, the general plan update establishes a village floor area ratio limit of 2.0. The next two slides show existing floor area ratios along 41st Avenue. This slide shows the area north of Capitola Road. As you can see, properties along 41st Avenue generally have lower floor area ratios due to the presence of large street-facing parking lots. There are a number of properties south of Capitola Road which support higher floor area ratios, notably the Best Western and Fairfield Inns, which have approximate floor area ratios of 2.0. Nonetheless, building intensity along this stretch of 41st Avenue is still relatively low, especially when you consider the availability of public transportation and proximity of shopping and other personal service establishments. One of the key goals of the general plan is to promote the transformation of 41st Avenue to feature more street-facing and pedestrian-friendly retail and mixed-use development. Accordingly, the general plan update establishes higher intensity limits in this area to encourage beneficial redevelopment projects. Proposed floor area ratios would be 2.0 in the regional commercial designation north of Capitola Road and 1.5 in the community commercial designation south of Capitola Road. This chart shows existing and proposed floor area ratio limits by land use designation. The far right column shows the maximum intensity allowed under the proposed increased floor area ratio allowance, which we'll discuss in more detail in the following slides. The general plan includes a provision for an increased floor area ratio allowance to provide future decision makers with flexibility to consider well-designed projects which offer significant community and economic benefits. This provision was initially proposed for any property in the village or along 41st Avenue. However, additional restrictions were subsequently applied in response to concerns raised by the GPAC and members of the public related to potential land use conflicts with neighboring residential uses. As currently proposed, the increased floor area ratio allowance would only be eligible for hotels in the village or properties located on the west side of 41st Avenue or which front the 41st Avenue Capitola Road intersection. In addition, requests for increased floor area ratio allowance would require City Council approval and findings that increased floor area ratio would result in a superior project with substantial community benefits, that the project would significantly enhance economic vitality, and that the project is designed to minimize adverse impacts to neighboring properties. Following the November Planning Commission City Council hearing, staff performed a closer examination of the 41st Avenue corridor to evaluate opportunities and constraints for increased floor area ratio. The next 3 slides will show the residential commercial interface along 41st Avenue with an approximate 100-foot setback depicted to show where greater development intensity could be accommodated while still providing separation between adjacent residential uses. This slide shows the area around 41st Avenue and Clare Street. As shown, the area north of Clare Street offers very limited opportunities for increased intensity without being situated too close to residential uses. The area south of Clare's, however, has adequate space to accommodate new street-facing development and expansive setbacks between residential uses. Moving further south on 41st Avenue, the area around Capitola Road intersection also has adequate space to accommodate increased building intensities while also providing expanded setbacks. The southern end of 41st Avenue near the intersection with Jade Street also has areas which could provide adequate separation between new street-facing commercial development and existing residential neighborhoods. The Planning Commission may recommend that the proposed floor area ratio limits and provisions for increased floor area ratio allowance be adopted or modified. Staff recommends an approach which provides flexibility to consider increased building intensities when projects can demonstrate tangible public benefits. Providing some level of increased floor area ratio minimizes the need for future general plan amendments, enables the city to accommodate anticipated growth, and provides an incentive for positive redevelopment in targeted areas of the city. As such, staff recommends modifying the increased floor area ratio allowance provision to enable consideration of any property along the 41st Avenue corridor which can provide a minimum 100-foot setback from residentially zoned areas. In the village, staff believes a hotel-only restriction is reasonable. However, it is conceivable that a mixed-use project on either the former theater site or the mercantile site could also benefit from an increased intensity. Finally, staff recommends that more fine-grained development standards and controls be incorporated into the new zoning ordinance to implement the intent of the general plan. The second issue for the Planning Commission's consideration is a request submitted by Barbara and Jim Redding to change the land use designation at 412-414 Bay Avenue. The property has an existing and proposed multifamily general plan land use designation and zone classification. Mr. and Mrs. Redding have requested a change to a neighborhood mixed-use designation to allow future development of visitor accommodations or low-density office uses. Mr. and Mrs. Redding cite their proximity to Gale's Bakery and existing noise impacts as the basis of their request. The property at 412 414 Bay Avenue, outlined here in red, is currently developed with 3 single-family residences and 5 cottages. The property borders Gales Bakery to the west and single-family and multifamily residential uses to the north and east. The vacant lot shown next to the Bay Avenue property is currently being developed with single-family residences.
2 single-family residents.
Correct.
I thought you said single-family resident, but there's 2 of them.
There's 2 of them, correct. To evaluate this request, staff examined the use types currently allowed under the current proposed and requested land use designations and zone classifications. Under current and proposed conditions, a site could be developed with residential uses and care facilities as principally permitted uses. Private schools, churches, convalescent homes, bed and breakfast, and other transient use types could also be developed through a conditional use permit. A change to the requested neighborhood mixed use designation, along with an accompanying zone change to neighborhood commercial, would allow a variety of other commercial uses, including offices, laundromats, grocery stores, bars, restaurants, liquor stores, and recycling collection facilities. Staff has concerns that the requested change to a neighborhood mixed-use land use designation and an associated zone change could introduce additional commercial uses which would be incompatible with the existing neighboring residential uses. In addition, bed and breakfast and other transient use types could be developed under existing proposed multifamily residential designation through a conditional use permit. Although offices are not currently a principally or conditionally allowed use in multifamily zones, staff has informed Mr. Redding that such an allowance could be considered during the zoning ordinance update. Mr. Redding indicated agreement with this approach, and therefore staff recommends retaining the current multifamily land use designation on the property. In conclusion, staff finds that the proposed general plan update before you this evening is a product of extensive public participation which meets current legal standards, provides the public, decision makers, and staff with a more user-friendly document, and fulfills the community's desires to place increased emphasis on sustainability and protections for residential neighborhoods, finite environmental resources, and historic and cultural amenities. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution to certify the final environmental impact report and adopt a mitigation, monitoring, reporting program and statement of overriding considerations, as well as adopt a resolution to adopt the City's general plan update and to provide specific recommendations regarding floor area ratio and the property at 412 414 Bay Avenue. This concludes my presentation, and I'll now turn it over to David Early. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice report, staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm David Early, and as many of you know, I'm the founding principal of Design Community and Environment, now PlaceWorks. As of March 3rd, we changed our name. We're all the same people, though. And I'm here this evening with Ben Noble, who's been the principal in charge on this project. And Ben and I have both felt it's really just been an honor as well as a pleasure to be able to work with your community on this general plan over the last 3 years. It's been a remarkable effort, and I think you all have created a general plan that you can be really proud of, and that represents a community-wide consensus based on the 3 basic principles that Rich spoke about, the principles of sustainability, preservation of the neighborhoods and Capitola's overall character, and appropriate economic development in limited locations. We have been very impressed with the amount of public involvement that's occurred on this project. As you know, there have been extensive public workshops. The GPAC, through all the meetings that Rich mentioned, has reviewed the entire document line by line, chapter by chapter, and then after doing that, re-reviewed the entire document as it existed as a whole. And then Rich responded to 300 individual comments through a matrix to be able to provide individual pieces of information. So I want to just remind you and assure you that this document has been thoroughly vetted, has been given a very thorough review, and we believe is really ready to move forward. And I want to particularly recognize Chair Ortiz as well as former Commissioner Ed Newman, who've been liaisons from the Planning Commission and I believe have ensured that the Planning Commission's comments have been and thoughts have been included within this overall process. I do want to also mention in terms of that public involvement that you all don't prepare as many general plans as we do. I want to ensure you that to receive only 8 comment letters primarily with editorial comments is a remarkably small number for a general plan like this. And I think it's a reflection of the fact that the residents of Capitola, who've clearly been very aware of this process, are also very comfortable with this process, because you would have otherwise seen many more comments. When we do a general plan update, it's not at all unusual to receive 50, 60, 100 comment letters, and here you have only 8, and all almost only editorial in nature. We are aware, of course, of the 2 items that Rich has talked to you about that we do want your guidance on this evening. I want to just mention that Ben and I are both very supportive of the staff recommendations that you have before you, because they really are consistent with those 3 principles I talked about. They support sustainability, they support preservation, they're consistent with the existing character of the city, and they also provide for appropriate economic development. So as soon as you all have acted on this, and this does move forward to the City Council, we're going to come back to you and begin what to me and to Ben is an even more exciting set of initiatives, which is to update the zoning code. I know that really the fact that we get excited about that is probably scarier than anything to you. But as you know, this is covered in the contract that we already have with you. It will address many of the very detailed issues that I know that you as the Commission and the public are very concerned about. We don't want to get bogged down in those details right now, but we will be ready to dive into the zoning code as soon as we have moved through your Commission and then the City Council for general plan adoption. So we're excited to be able to get to that step and look forward to your action as soon as you're ready to take it, hopefully this evening. Ben and I, of course, along with Rich, are available to answer any questions you may have, and we look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Does that conclude the staff presentation? It does. Thank you. Questions for staff?
Yes, I have one question. I attended the Chamber of Commerce Economic Summit, or whatever you want to call it, and I think I heard the presenter very well with regards to, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but Councilmember Norton's idea with the mixed-use residential and commercial development out on 41st Avenue, but I haven't seen any changes in light of that, and that bothers me a little bit, because I, for a number of years, had bought into the idea that anything would be better than the sea of cars in front of the mall, but he suggested that any residential in that area might be very detrimental to the economy of the city of Capitola. And so I'd like to hear staff's, and that's directly related to the FA floor area ratios out in that area. So I'd like to hear from you on that.
Well, you'll have to forgive me. I was not in attendance that night. I was attending to a newborn baby, unfortunately. But anecdotally, what I've heard in regards to his presentation was that there was not a lot of inconsistencies with the visions that are put forth in the general plan and the background work on redefining the 41st Avenue corridor. I think, generally speaking, most of us would agree that large seas of parking lots are not our desired form along 41st Avenue, and we'd like to have more street-facing commercial retail opportunities, something that's more attractive to pedestrians and alternative modes of transportation. In terms of introducing mixed-use types of development, there are limits. They can certainly create land-use compatibility issues, but I think if you're selective and careful with that process, that they can be integrated into 41st Avenue effectively and be a good economic development driver.
I walked away from the meeting, and I did attend with a totally different attitude. In fact, the principal from the mall that was here, the young lady, also was concerned about that, and I can understand why. The proposal, if ever came forward, would eliminate a great deal of their parking that, while true it's only filled Thanksgiving to Christmas, it certainly wouldn't be there to be filled at that time if you had more commercialism on the bottom floor and residential units on the top floor, facing on 41st Avenue from the Bank of America up to the other home savings or whatever it is at the other end. And this has always been Councilman Norton's dream, and the economic development person that spoke to us thought it was principally a bad idea, and I didn't see anybody supporting it that night, and there was a very large crowd. So I'm had a little
Yeah.
bit of a loggerhead on it.
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind is the general plan does not require any type of development like that on 41st Avenue, but it does allow for it. And there's other ways to accommodate the parking needs of the mall and those other large shopping plazas, whether it be parking structures,
Yeah,
using
and that
shared
would
parking
be,
arrangements.
in my estimation, it would not be keeping in with the flavor of Capitola. For example, one of the
Well, we're at question, we're in the question form here. We're not in the debating form.
I'm not in the
Because we haven't
debate.
we need to open it to, we need to ask questions of staff at this point and get answers and then move on and then start talking about how we feel about things, I think.
Okay, I'll go for your.
Thank you. So, did you get your question answered, though? Did you-
Yes.
Okay.
Staff didn't think it was important, they weren't at the meeting. I got it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? You're okay?
I'm okay.
Okay. Any other questions for staff right now?
Not
All
right
right.
now.
I just didn't want to get into a big, philosophical, because I've got things to say on this too, and
I have one question, and it's kind of a reach, but it's something that Rich and I touched on a little bit before the meeting that I just wanted to bring out. It has to do with some of the mitigating actions that are there. They may say that we would amend the zoning code to require new developments and major renovations to incorporate measures, And in one of the issues that I was discussing was the difference between a new development, and requiring that they have showers and bicycle racks and everything, and a major renovation. And one of the things that I wanted to ask, if it says in a mitigating action that we require it, that may change as things go forward, and we may not require it of all. So it's not an absolute.
No, the mitigation measures that are outlined in the EIR are required to be implemented. That's the purpose of the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Program. However, I think you might be referring to the requirement to develop a climate action plan. And in the EIR, they list a menu of different greenhouse gas emission reduction measures, which could be used to achieve the overall objective of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 15% from 2005 levels. That's simply a menu of options that we could use. The form that the final climate action plan takes is yet to be determined. Some of those items will probably make it into the climate action plan. There's probably others we haven't thought of yet that'll make it there. That was simply intended to demonstrate that there are a series of different actions that could be used to achieve the overall objective.
Okay, but if it's not in that section and it's a mitigating action and it requires it, then it does require.
Yeah, I believe in that section, the way it's worded is the city shall adopt a climate action plan within 18 months of adoption of the general plan, which may include, and then it's got a laundry list of different reduction measures.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, then I'll open it up. This is a public hearing, and so anybody who's here tonight to talk about the general plan update, environmental impact report, please step forward.
My name is John McGregor, and I grew up in Livermore. Put my boots on and have been on since. As far as Livermore jokes go, okay, I bought the haunted house at 410 Bay Street and tore that down. And so I have over a 200-foot property fence with this property here at 412. And yes, residential houses are going in, and any thought of it turning commercial and a bar going in, which is possible. I'm aware that the bakery makes noise and is doing what it can to limit its noise. The thought of a commercial anything, a recycling or a bar going in next door, making more noise, is just doubling the noise for all the houses around there. And all the residents are extremely concerned in starting to band together. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, who's got the front property there, and together we'll let you know how we feel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGregor.
Hi, Jerry Jensen. We're in the property in the front that's under construction, and I came before your group, I think it was in November, for approval. My concern just with the rezoning was when I went through the whole process, it was very talked about how to for us to design our house for our family to keep in the kind of the tone and look of Capitola. For example, we were looking at putting in a two-car garage door, and that was discouraged by the staff to say we want to keep within the theme of Capitola, setting up kind of like the entrance, if you want to call it, going down to the village. So now to come to find out that a neighbor approximately 12 feet away from a corner of our property is looking to have the area rezoned to go to, I call it commercial, I don't know what the exact terminology is very kind of discouraging for us. I've talked to a lot of neighbors in the neighborhood. They're like not even really aware that it was coming forward to something at this forum. I know like when our house went up, I know you notified the neighborhood. I guess there's regulations regarding that, so everything, but there was nothing notified to anybody about this action, because my understanding from Katie was that it was underneath the general plan update, but it seems like it's been added. So the neighbors I've talked to are completely unaware of this. So if this would be something that you guys were looking at really taking some action on, if it could be pushed off for a certain period of time so there can be more involvement from the community to have their voices heard, or to let them know this really is a possibility of an issue. The other thing is, Mr. Redding did send a letter, and some of the things that he points out why he wants his property rezoned to be commercial are the same exact feelings that I have, other neighbors have. And I just want to briefly just point out a couple things that he's talking about. He says because where he sits, his property, connected to the bakery, he receives numerous complaints and concerns from his tenants about being next to a property like that. So I'm quite sure that everybody else in the neighborhood would share in what his concerns are, because he is so close to that. The other thing he says, unfortunately, but trying to blend the residential bedrooms a few feet away from a high-intensive commercial uses is not conducive or desirable for quality of living. And that's exactly what our point is. If it's not desirable for him where he sits today to take and push commercial further into the neighborhood, and now it alleviates his concern because he wouldn't be there anymore, or his property or whatever zone, the tenants in his part, and to push the issue farther down the road just seems like it's just not the right thing to do. So that's what my concern is. We're new coming into the community. We're shocked to even hear that this would even be a possibility. And with, like I said, to repeat myself, just the design of our house, we're really trying to really play into what any comments we heard from you guys, heard from the planning department, and tie all that in. And it seems like if we couldn't even have a two-car garage, how can a property 12 feet away be rezoned into a bar, a recycling center? So I appreciate your time.
May I ask you a couple questions, Mr.
Absolutely.
Jensen, and maybe Mr. McGregor could come up too. I think when Mr. Redding had that idea, he himself doesn't have the idea of making it those things, but what if he sells it someday,
Absolutely.
And so I think none of us, I think we are absolutely understanding staff's recommendation on this, which is to really downgrade the whole thing. My question to you both is, would you be adverse in the future to seeing a mix of residential and, say, office buildings going in there, or some very, very much lower? That was my idea when I supported him, which it would be a buffer where there would be this high intensity use and then this very low intensity, quieter but commercial use where people go away at night, like offices, and that helps you on one side and me on the other. That's kind of what we had in mind, and that sounds like the direction staff's going in. Did you have a chance to review that part at all, or see that?
Yeah, I did. I reviewed that, and I appreciate staff's. I guess I looked at as staff's recommendation. Earlier they made a recommendation to disallow the theater. So again, I'm not trying to be confrontational against. I'm supporting what their decision is, but I knew that you guys could also override what their staff recommendation.
So you are supporting staff's decision?
Well, except for a certain point of when you look at rezoning, I don't know really what that means. Office space that turns into be two-story. That's I don't know what the setback would be, 10 feet off. That looks into our property.
Right.
that could be an issue.
Right.
Office space that turns into what type of office space? The next thing I would bring up would be parking. Already we're in, I know I'm new, but we're already.
All right, we like new
you know,
people.
we already have parking issues, and I know we're creating some by doing construction. We try to bring that all onto the site, but I know with the parking, people going to the bakery, the employees of the bakery, and to now bring in office complex. And what if office complex turned into, you know, let's say an open counseling center, and they had counseling meetings, you know, for counseling groups of people, 25 people. Where are they all going to park? So that would be my
And night meetings, or, you know,
yeah,
night
and where would,
counseling.
and how would that all tie into parking? So when I first heard about it, and I was trying to play a neutral role and say, you know, how would it work? If the aesthetic way the house looks right now, from the aesthetic point of view, if they stayed intact and those were small little office spaces as they were today, used for, you know, small impact, they have parking, you know, so let's just say one was a physical therapy place and they have only room for 2 different people that could come in, and they already have parking for 2 people that live in that place. I really don't think that would really impact the neighborhood, and that's just speaking from my point of perspective.
Right.
But I'm more concerned if the zoning gets changed, Mr. Redding decides to sell his property off, and the new person comes in and have the zoning, what does office space look like?
Okay, I think I hear where you guys are coming from.
I believe that the buildings that are on there.
You'll need to speak into the mic. You'll speak to the mic.
The buildings that are on there are not in good condition. And so I think that they're going to change to something else, and this is something else I'm worried about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Anybody else want to speak about this? Anything about the general plan that you've come to speak about? Okay. All right, then. Commissioners, what are your thoughts?
Madam Chair, I have a, I would, maybe we could just get through part of this and move on to some other stuff. It has to do with this land use designation change, because I really don't even see that being part of our general plan update. I think that's, to me, a whole separate matter. Maybe we could, I don't know if we can do it like a straw poll vote, get rid of that, take that off the table now, then talk about the general plan, because I don't even see this land use designation change being a part of what is a 15, 20-year plan here. So,
Is there anybody that disagrees with that comment?
Well, but I think it's going to be considered at the council, so I think we need to provide some guidance.
well, I'm more than happy to make a motion that we deny that, and we support staff saying that we don't consider that motion to change the land use designation.
I'm not
this
even
time.
sure we want to go as far as, hearing what I'm hearing tonight, you know, I'm not sure we want to, at this point, even go as far as what you're saying, because there is a chance that, you know, the parking is an issue, and, you know, any intensification of use on that would be, you know, how do we structure it so that we are really limiting that property? Can we do that? Can we say, you know, no night use, parking must be, you know?
Certainly, I think any discretionary project that would come through would have to comply with the various development standards, setbacks, parking, and the like. Like the zoning currently allows some limited commercial uses with a conditional use permit. The only thing it doesn't is the offices. So the response to Mr. Redding was, we can certainly look at that when we update the zoning ordinance. It wasn't a commitment. It would be something that ultimately the commission and city council would have to weigh in on.
And we deal with it with the zoning update and not with the general
Yeah,
plan at
because
all.
even if you wanted to make a change to the general plan update land use designation, there's still a follow-up that you have to change the zone to allow those uses. So,
And I have some real concerns that these neighbors were not notified about this. You know, that's not right. You know, it's amazing they found out. I don't know how they found out about it, but, you know, it's a good thing they did. So,
I think you could almost guarantee that if the land use designation were changed on that, it would be up for sale tomorrow.
yeah.
And we would have an application, it's some new owner in there, and this gentleman would be back fighting the battle all over again.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
had
think
no
we need to
idea
go there.
when I told Jim I would send my letter of recommendation. I know what he wants for that property. You know, he wants offices, but I also know he's, you know, now that you say it, he's really interested in selling that
Oh,
property.
yeah. He's looking for a way to ease the
Maximize
development
his-
and make some money
yeah,
off of it.
Yeah.
So how do we, so question to staff, how do we move forward? Can we remove this part from the,
you know, I think
So
that
just make a recommendation that
the commission
we,
could vote, or I think I'd get a sense of where the tide is going, and that would be adequate to report to the council as well. I suspect that they'll have the same feeling about it.
okay. and then these folks will be notified when it goes to, what night
Well,
it
I
will
mean,
go to the
that's a
council.
little bit of a tricky thing. This was a request from a citizen. We don't typically notify residents of a citizen request. It's
When
not
do you
a,
think this might go to
But
the
if
council?
there were, if there was what he asked for, a zoning change, then everybody within 500, so that's the proper way to go.
if we were proposing it, if it was part of the plan, we would certainly have notified them, of course.
But if we went to, when we do the zoning changes, the zoning updates, any zone changes that come before the commission, the 500 feet residents would be notified before we
Correct.
hear it, right? Okay.
Significant changes. I mean, if you are making very minor changes, perhaps not, but significant changes to intensity, density, and things that a person would realize, they would be notified.
Would you consider adding offices to this designation? Okay.
Everything in Capitola is significant.
That's
Ah,
point well
sorry
taken.
to put,
Point well
put it to
taken.
you that way.
But one of the takeaways for you folks to hear is that there is a possibility that somebody could come in if he sells it with a B&B proposal for this piece of property, and you'd have to, you'll have to approach that when and if it comes. So, okay. All right, then I think we're really clear about that we're not going to be recommending that to go forward for approval to the council.
I have a question, again, of staff. In your presentation and in the reports that we received, the 100-foot setback in the 41st Avenue area from residential
So
property.
you folks are okay, you can go.
And when I look at it, it's in the parking lots, mainly behind Whole Foods, McDonald's, all the way down there. In other words, between Capitola Road and Clare Street, where we have the connecting driveways and the parking for the delivery for trucks and stuff like that. It seems almost, why would anybody ever want to move? I mean, why would you want to designate that as a 100-foot setback for new development?
The intent was just to demonstrate that there is capacity on these sites. Say if one of them wanted to redevelop and build something facing the street and provide a buffer, a real buffer, instead of a loading dock to the residences in the rear.
So you're suggesting if they pulled out like Wells Fargo is out on the corner,
Right.
and they pulled Whole Foods to the sidewalk out on 41st, you'd like to see a 100-foot buffer at the back of the property. Is that really what you were trying to get at?
No, it's just to demonstrate that there's distance on the site, that if you were to develop it properly, that adequate protections could be provided to limit the amount of nuisance effects to adjacent residential areas. Because if you recall, when we had our joint meeting, there was a discussion of, well, are you talking only the corner banks at Capitola Road and 41st Avenue?
remember.
Or should we also look at some of those that, they might not be right at the corner, they might be 100 feet away. Could they theoretically be developed without impacting residences? So this was just an attempt to show that some of these areas have a lot of frontage and theoretically could be developed in such a way that you would minimize those effects.
So what it encourages is 3, 4, 5-story buildings fronting along 41st Avenue.
That's exactly what I was
Well, in terms of a floor area ratio, it could, but would that fit within the height limits of the zoning ordinance?
But, my personal take on it is this creates a loophole in the zoning ordinance big enough to drive a truck through, because all you have to do is have a council that wants to develop, and they can make those necessary 3 findings, and the zoning ordinance really becomes moot. It doesn't mean anything.
Well,
I've experienced 45 years of city councils in this community, Rich, and I've seen councils that would toss the zoning ordinance out and use those findings to develop anything they wanted. And that's how we've got some of the Park Avenue condos there that are 4 and 5 stories tall facing the ocean. I have a problem with the whole concept of the FAR. I know we have to put it in according to state law, but increasing it, sometimes doubling it, tripling it to what's proposed, and then even going beyond that in the increased FAR allowance, I just can't buy that.
I think
I've seen too many times in this community what can happen when there's a loophole that allows councils to sidestep the zoning ordinance.
I think you're correct. I mean, the council is a legislative body for the city, whether it be a plan development, a rezone, or a general plan amendment. They have the authority to allow a development by amending the ordinances. Whether there's a provision to allow increased intensity or not.
I'm sorry, can I
Sure.
stop for a moment? I'm not sure that I ever closed the public hearing. I think we got a little bit off of that last comment. And we still may have some people here tonight who want to speak to this, so let's just stop for a sec because this is a good discussion. Is there anyone here that wants to speak about the general plan update? Did I do this already?
I don't know,
It's
when you
deja vu
started
all over
talking
again?
about your neighbor, I thought you had.
Well, I'm not sure I have, so let's just do it again.
I got to
just
get
wanna
back at
double
you,
check,
see?
because I see one person out there that I don't know why she's here, and I want to make sure she doesn't want to speak. So, all right, we're good. We'll close the public hearing. Oh, doesn't mean you have to leave. Aha.
Thank
See,
you.
I never did it.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Mary Gourlay. I'm with Barry Swenson Builder, and I'm not here really, I haven't come with prepared comments. I am here to listen to the discussion as it pertains to the FAR. And I did, depending on how the meeting went to just vocalize my support of what's already been expressed in terms of the extensive effort that the staff has gone through in terms of looking at these issues very, very carefully, receiving community input at the workshops, and evaluating the circumstances to come up with what they have today. Personally, looking at some options that we have for the site and for the Village Hotel, I can say that we basically have a much more creative option if we have that additional flexibility that the FAR allows, and it really allows us to step the hotel up and still achieve some goals that we are trying to get at, and without having big structures right on the street that will have a negative impact to the community. So I think that this is a tool, as it's presented currently, which is going to be of benefit, in our opinion, because it provides us with some flexibility in the proposal, which will, of course, be still going before you at the time, for an actual project. So.
Now, you're referring to the hotel in the Village?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my comments on the FAR really didn't pertain to the Village.
Okay. Well, that site is one that's being looked at and evaluated. And in general, I think that I just wanted to again voice my support for staff, all the extensive efforts that they've gone through, and the detailed research, and just say that sometimes, and I think this is true in the Village itself, it's so well articulated architecturally that flexibility can really become important and provide for a better end result if you don't otherwise have it. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Good. I knew there was a face out there. I didn't know. Thank you very much. So I'm fairly sure that now we can close the public hearing, and Mick, please continue.
So my primary concern then is with the FAR, what's proposed, and the increased FAR allowance that's proposed. Not so much for the Village, because I think the Village is a unique animal, but for the other commercial areas and the community commercial areas, I just think it opens the door to some really high density development at the whims of a council, whoever they may be at the time. And I know our consultant indicated we only had 8 letters responding to concerns in the general plan update. But I bet if the community were aware of the FAR and what it represents and the potential that it could represent, I bet we'd have far more letters addressing that issue.
I'll just make a comment on that. I went to quite a few of the GPAC meetings, and I was the only one in the audience. So when they say they were vetted well with 19 meetings, if you call me well, okay. That doesn't mean that the process wasn't good, because the initial meeting, when we held it over at the Jade Street Center, was well attended, and as the time went by, it just ended off and off. I can remember getting up and speaking to the item that the young lady just spoke to, the hotel in the Village. I didn't think that the things that the GPAC and the consultant were doing with that for a general plan was the right place for it. It's in the zone. Everything they were talking about would be in the zoning ordinance for that piece of property, and it got dropped to where I'm satisfied with it. But I agree with Mick. The floor area ratio, and every time we start one of these projects, and no reflection on the people that helped write this and helped do this, we keep saying we want Capitola to be nice and we want to preserve the residential neighborhoods. And then somehow we get these loopholes that we can overbuild. And we have lots of examples of
I can provide a good example from a long time ago. And it's in a regional commercial area, which the increased FAR allowance here is proposed for 3.0, okay? And you remember this, Ron, it's where the DMV now stands.
Yep.
There was a 7-story office building proposed for that site. It probably would fit with this 3.0 FAR on that particular lot. We held a council meeting, a public hearing, to decide on the fate of that project. The meeting was so large we had to hold it in the parking lot. We had over 200 people in attendance, and everyone was opposed to it. So that, I think, is a prime example, and that was, 40-some years ago. And I think this community is much more aware now and much more opposed to that kind of development proposal than they were then. So, that's why I think these proposals are really out of touch with what the community would like to see in the future.
And I think what this kind of thing does is continue to make a council or a planning commission have to deny projects or have to and continue one fight after another in our community, where we sort of know we don't like it to begin with. Why would we set ourselves up for a developer thinking they might be getting through? Now the staff spends a lot of time on this development, and they get pared down to the point where they can't afford the development, and then the development never happens. And we've seen this over and over again, and this community just doesn't want heavy development, and it doesn't happen. And we see these projects get to their development stage, and now they can't afford it because they've been dumbed down or scaled back so much that the numbers don't work. Over and over again.
Can I ask a question, though? It seems to me like there are two issues that we're working on. One is setting a FAR that is actually somewhat representative of what we've got out there, which is not 0.5. And we've got the increased FAR limit that they're looking at, saying, well, this is the proposed FAR, but under these conditions you can get bigger than that. What I'm hearing is the latter of those two is we have some vehement opposal to, which is you can get bigger than the proposed FAR if you meet these conditions. But what I am not really sure I'm hearing is how you guys feel about the proposed FAR, which is closer to what we actually have out there than the 0.5 FAR that we have in the current general plan. Are you opposing both or just the latter?
Maybe you should put up that slide with the FARs, because the one on the what I'm opposed to is that third square.
The one on the right, the far right.
The one on the right, yeah.
But you're okay with the proposed FAR limits?
I have a problem with the
I have a problem with that
one,
too.
which is 4 times what currently exists.
But it's reflective of what exists on the street today. It reflects what we actually have built out there.
But what happens now is what's been being built. The property values were quite a bit lower, and so people felt they came to us with proposals that were much more moderate. With property values the way they are now, people will you could look at that same property, and if it sells, or even if it doesn't sell, the new development is going to come in, and they're going to want way more now than they did before. That whole AAA DMV thing. I mean, now that property is way more valuable than those developments. They're going to want way more than that.
Also, that's regional commercial, butts up against the Jewel Box neighborhood, and with the proposed FAR here, those buildings could be probably 4 stories, maybe even 5. And that's supposed to be a transition from our highest commercial use to our residential use.
And that's the problem we had over on 38th Avenue with the senior complex.
If I may, though, I again have to point out that the zoning ordinance has limitations to height and other things.
Make the findings, Rich.
That's only through the plan development permit.
It doesn't state that in here.
Well, it's because it's not part of the general plan. The plan development permit is part of the zoning ordinance. It does provide a flexible zoning vehicle for the city to allow projects that deviate from development standards.
But we just saw the council approve a plan development that didn't meet any of the criteria in the zoning ordinance. That's the senior housing on 38th.
The plan development does allow for deviations from development standards through zoning, not from the general plan, though. The plan development process cannot override the general plan.
Yeah, it says in there that variances to FAR limits established by the general plan are not permitted.
That's correct. Not without a general plan amendment.
But how do you get a general plan amendment?
So legislative action, I mean, the city council theoretically could amend the general plan if they found the reasons and could make the findings to do so for a project.
Can you put the map back up where you show what the on the street stuff is?
On 41st?
Yes, please.
So this is north of Capitola Road. Up here, I mean, most of the floor area ratios are really low because it's a sea of parking lots. As you get south, there are some examples. The hotel is a Fairfield and the Best Western. The Veterans Center is a little bit under 1. Capitola Beach Villa is 1.2. The building at 1500 41st Avenue is approaching 2. So there are some examples of projects that have had higher floor area ratios that I think in general, you know, fit in relatively well with the neighborhood. And so those are the types of things that we were looking at when we were trying to set baseline floor area ratios.
Well, I guess you have to look at, if you look at the Fairfield Inn and the Best Western, which are two of the largest buildings close to 41st Avenue, and with the proposed FAR here, which would allow that, we could have buildings that size lining 41st Avenue into the future. Correct?
Yes.
It would be compliant with the general plan limits on floor area ratio, but that doesn't mean that it would comply with zoning or that it would get through the discretionary review process. I mean, I understand your misgivings about it, but all that would mean was that it would comply with the general plan.
And would we, you know, we would be able to entertain, we would have to entertain, you know, whatever application came forward.
Sure. I mean, I tell applicants a lot of times, or members of the public, somebody can propose anything they want. I mean, they can propose a nuclear waste dump on their property. It would never get approved, but we would have to process the application. Somebody could come in with a general plan amendment to build a 7-story building, and we would process it.
Well, if I could, I might just try and look at this from one other perspective. I appreciate very much what Commissioner Smith is talking about, because the guidance that you have in your general plan today actually doesn't allow most anything that you have built today along 41st Avenue. And so I think at the very least you would want to consider creating some floor area ratio that would allow, for instance, in the event of a fire, for those buildings to be rebuilt. You would have to currently do a general plan amendment to allow the rebuilding of any of those sites if they were destroyed in a fire or an earthquake. They're not allowed to be built.
Which sites are you talking about specifically?
The ones that you're seeing up here, or the ones on Rich's slide on the north side of
Fairfield and the
That's not true at all. They get the property rezoned as planned development, and the sky's the limit.
They still cannot violate the general plan without a general plan amendment. And the general plan right now says an FAR of 0.5. So they actually have to rebuild at an FAR of 0.5 unless they have a general plan amendment, which you would either make now or you might make at the time of that disaster.
Well, then how are they currently built?
I know, they were just
Yeah,
built.
you just contradicted yourself. All those that are built are not according to our general plan that was in effect at the time they were built, and yet there were no general plan amendments for them.
I would let staff comment on how you build things.
I can tell you going forward, any projects we review that come in the door are going to be reviewed against the general plan and are either going to be compliant or will receive a recommendation of denial
You
without
guys are here
amendment.
now, and then somebody else comes later. That's the whole nature
I think
of
it's
this,
possible
is it moves around.
that you all did, under previous planning staffs, approve projects that were actually not in compliance with your own general plan.
It's clear. We
And
did.
I don't think you want to go on record as saying, well, our method of dealing with this is that we'll just ignore the general plan from here on out as well. It's a much better situation, I think, to try and adopt regulations that you actually would enforce. And the other, so that's one point I would make. The second point, and if you put up the slide, Rich, of the southern area, I think the interesting thing about it is that the southern area of 41st Avenue, which I at least consider to be more in keeping with the kind of character that I would like to see in Capitola, has actually higher FARs. And the village, of course, has higher FARs still. And what that says to me is that the issue is not the FAR. The issue is the type of design that actually happens, and that design happens through the design regulations that are included in the zoning code. What I see the general plan as doing is to create the envelope in which good design can happen. And if you create a really small envelope and then say try and do good design, you'll get not so good design, and you also don't have good zoning regulations, you'll get not so good design in a smaller envelope. If you do create a large enough envelope that's simply in keeping with what you already have in the village and you already have on the southern part of the corridor, then you create the possibility of creating projects that I think are more like the ones that Capitolans really do enjoy. The walkability, smaller, appropriately scaled buildings coming out to the street, but that still have FARs often of 1, 1.2, 1.5. Those numbers to me are the ones that, again, they create an envelope. It's not the zoning regulations, and then through the zoning regulations, you can, and I would encourage, I think the comments about the PD designation are very good. Again, that's a zoning issue, and when we come to the zoning issue, we can try and address those to tighten those up so that you wouldn't see exceedances there. But those are all zoning issues. Here we're just looking at that envelope. We want to set, my personal advice to you is try and set the envelope big enough that you can get projects like the ones you already know you like, such as the ones in the village, or the southern end of 41st Avenue, and then through the zoning make sure that those projects of a certain size don't have design characteristics that would be inappropriate here in the town, because we don't want those projects either.
I think the difference between the village and 41st Avenue is the kind
Night
of
and day.
residences we have. The residents in Capitola Village expect that kind of development. They know it's already there. When you talk about the development being with a 100-foot buffer on 41st Avenue to keep them away from the residents there, those are different kinds of neighborhoods, and so I think we are going to end up with them.
And if you have just to take your South 41st Avenue area, in other words, south of Capitola Road, if you were to take Begonia Plaza and Star Development and have them be eliminated by fire, and you have what you're proposing as the FAR for those in this general plan, mixed right. You could have 4 stories of buildings there. And so it's very important to set a reasonable FAR, not based on do you like the Fairfield or whatever it's called out there, but what could happen. And that's, what could happen is how we got all the Balboa apartments that face the ocean. It's how we got the at the end of Cliff Drive and the ocean there, how we got the building that's falling off the cliff. And Crest Apartments, yeah. And so I think, you asked tonight for an FAR that's reasonable on these, and I think what we've seen tonight from staff and as a result of the PAC and the rest of it, the GPAC, is that this is the high end, not the reasonable approach.
Can't we start out with closer to the FAR that we've got now and use those, if the proposal, like go back to the 3 categories, start out with the FARs that we've got now closer to them, and then say if they meet these criteria, they can be increased. And possibly can you put in something that says if a development is demolished by a natural disaster or a fire or whatever, some language about it will be considered a buildable back to its former or whatever.
But what FAR numbers would you want to see?
We need to go back to the slide that talks about the...
Yeah, and, I would remark that Commissioner Graves is correct. I mean, when we selected the floor area ratio numbers, we did look to go at the high end for the purposes of CEQA. We can always dial back the floor area ratio limits without having a CEQA problem, but if we were to sit here today and offer something you thought was too low and that should have been increased, then we'd have to go back and rerun the analysis and recirculate the EIR. So we recognize these are at the high level. And if the Commission and ultimately City Council dial them back, we can do that, adopt the plan, and not have any additional processing.
Can we go back to the chart?
Let's just take it line by line, maybe.
Sure. So the village mixed-use area, as I tried to show in the presentation, the floor area ratios down in the village are generally between 1 and 2. If you have a 1-story structure down there, it's going to be very close to 1, and if it's 2 stories, it's going to be 2. There's a couple of examples where it actually goes up to about 2.5, but those are the exceptions. The old superintendent's building probably is around 2.5. That would probably be your bulkiest building in the village. So we thought a 2.0 limit in the village would be reflective of what we allow there, and also keep in mind that first floor residential uses can't be developed there because of the flood regulations.
I'm in favor of this one.
And the
increased floor area ratio allowance, frankly, was keeping in mind that there could be a hotel at the former theater site. You do have the Mercantile site, which someday in the next 20 years, who knows, it could be redeveloped, and they might want to occupy that parking lot with a more beneficial use type. So we thought something, you know, around 3, maybe it's 2.5, would allow those types of projects to come in and be well designed and fulfill the community's vision.
But why do we have to think in that box that we've got the Mercantile and we've got the Heen building? I can remember when the Six Sisters were all in one ownership, and then that would be equally as big as, much bigger than the Heen building and the rest of it. And if you had that 3.0, it's exactly what we don't want. You would want to build from the ocean at a low level and move back into the cliff so that everybody has a view of the spectacular Monterey Bay or something. And we're thinking in the box that every property is going to stay the same. People come buy two lots all the time.
Well, again, floor area ratio, though, is a ratio between the lot size and the building area. And I think you're right. What we're trying to do is look more into the future to accommodate change where it may happen. And those are 2 sites in the village that we look at. We recognize that something's probably going to happen there in the future. And floor area ratio really doesn't dictate form. I think what we're really concerned about is form. Theoretically, I guess you could build a 6-story structure with a higher floor area ratio, but would Capitola want it and ultimately approve it? My guess is no.
It could happen. That's the problem. It could happen.
It did
Yeah, but
happen.
having purchased, I mean, you used me as an example, having 2 houses
Oh, I
side by
wasn't
side.
picking on you.
But there are a whole myriad of reasons why you can't combine those 2 lots, you can't build one house, you can't connect the 2 houses. There's a whole bunch of things that kept us doing what we did.
But residential doesn't have a FAR.
We do in the zoning ordinance, not in the general plan. Kind of a
We did have a
weird anomaly, but. So that's the village mixed use. In the regional commercial designations, again, looking at things like the Fairfield, the Best Western, the County Veterans Center, those buildings approach a floor area ratio of 2.0. We thought that was appropriate limit. If another hotel comes in there, and there's been talks of it, that they could build to the same intensity. The increased allowance, again, we thought that was a ceiling. If something came in and it was a good project, maybe offered some community benefits, and again, I think it would have to be something tangible. Maybe a floor area ratio, if it's well designed, of 3 would be appropriate. Community commercial, south of Capitola Road, there's also some on Bay Avenue. We looked at 1.5 as the proposal. I would point out that the Fairfield and Best Western both exceed that limit, and therefore we went up to like a 2.5 if a good project
Does the law
came in.
require you to have that increased FAR allowance?
No,
already
no.
there? So why
That-
do we even have it?
The reason we did that was not to have a blanket allowance anywhere in the city to have these higher floor area ratios, but to limit them to targeted areas. And we also tried to narrow it down with certain projects that provided some type of community public benefit. So that there was a provision to allow a bigger building, but only in very limited circumstances.
Loophole. That's what that's called.
Well,
Yeah, but the thing we have now is a general plan with a .5 that nobody listens to. Nobody pays any attention to it at all. It's a
Well, I'm not
worthless
saying they
document.
shouldn't be increased. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that the increased FAR allowance, I think, if it's not required by law, I think it should be discarded now. I don't even think we should have that. I don't think we should create that loophole that allows something way beyond and above what the community would ever perceive as being allowable.
Yeah, but ever's a long time, and I think that there were a large portion of people in the community that thought that it would be awesome to have a Santana Row kind of environment at 41st Avenue. And through this general plan process, that got vetted, and the community said, no, we don't want Santana Row there. But 15 years from now, who's to say? I mean, a lot of you guys have been on the council for a really long time, but there's going to be different people coming in, And not having any flexibility is going to put them 20 years from now
But by
having a
law,
plan.
you have to do it. What is it now? How often do you have to do a general plan?
There's not a set timeline. I mean,
There
generally the planning horizon is about 20, 25 years.
A long time.
You know, I mean, you can keep them alive longer if you do regular updates.
You mentioned just in passing how our 5-year review is coming up in 2015 for the land use element, which is not part of this. And I sat through the land use element meetings last time, and there were proposals by the council that maybe we ought to suggest that 600 Park Avenue be increased, and it backs up the entire residential neighborhood up there, and the people showed up, and we're really sensitive to overbuilding is the whole thing. Yet, look at the examples up there. If you look at the Fairfield and the Best Western and the rest of them, we had a lower FAR, but they still got built, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would point out in regards to that the place that requirement is in the current general plan is so hidden, it would be so easy to miss. It's in small text and a caption.
Yep.
So
that's what 20 years will do.
Yeah. So I don't even know if everyone realized it was there until we really looked at it closely.
If I could, I wanted to try and help you all move forward, because you've talked about this for quite a while. I think we've all said our pieces, and I hear an emerging consensus, so I wanted just to make a recommendation, if I could, Rich. Is that all right?
Of course.
I think that what I'm hearing you all say is that you're very uncomfortable with that third column of an increased allowance under certain circumstances. I think, obviously this will go to the council. The council will have staff's recommendation too, but I'd suggest that your recommendation probably is to eliminate that right-hand most column. And it sounds like it's also to change the line about the regional commercial down from 2.0 to 1.5 as the maximum, and to lower the community commercial from the proposed FAR of 1.5 down to 1.0. My sense of what you all are talking about is that would be pretty much what you're looking at. So to summarize, you wouldn't have the right-hand column. The proposed FAR for the village would be 2.0. For the neighborhood mixed use, it would be 1.0. The regional would go down from 2.0 to 1.5. Community commercial would go from 1.5 to 1. And then the last two would remain as they are on the table.
I could certainly live with that.
Although I did sense some support possibly for an increased floor area ratio in the village above the two.
I think there needs to be a process for that, exactly for the reason we talked about the theater property with the hotel. If we don't allow for that increase, then it forces a bigger structure further out to the street and doesn't allow the flexibility. So to me, there needs to be some process to allow that to happen.
Well, you have that. It's called a variance.
Again, you cannot do a variance from these general plan numbers. So if you don't have a policy to allow going up to 3 in your general plan, you can never go above 2.
Well, the hotel, in my estimation, in the village is a pipe dream, and I'm going to probably never see it in my lifetime because I'm an old fart. But if I see the Best Western getting built, and I see the Fairfield getting built, and the limitation in the village as far as this community is concerned is the height of that bluff between that and the property on Monterey Avenue or the Esplanade, whatever you want to call it, as it turns the corner there. It's a pipe dream right now. 65 units, they're going to be postage stamp units.
So I'd like to come back then. I think the question is, it sounded like most of you felt comfortable with my suggestion. There was a question, perhaps you do want to have the right-hand most column for an increased allowance in the village only. Right. And that would be, it would only be showing great community benefit, that if there's an advantage to it over the 2.0, that you can really demonstrate. And I hear some of you saying maybe to keep that column, that 3.0, on that row only.
I can live with that.
I'm just going to say that I still have a problem with dropping them to below what we have, because the buildings that are at 2 out there are buildings that were recently built. They've been built since I've been here. And what we're saying is that we are not going to allow those buildings to be built again down the street if it's appropriate, if it's a great design, if it's architecturally something that's beautiful, if the purpose is wonderful, if it's a project that we really, really want. We're not going to let another Fairfield Inn go in on 41st Avenue because the general plan will have a FAR that's less than it is.
Depends on the lot size.
It's a FAR.
And it depends on the lot size.
Everything depends on the lot size.
Well, it's true. I think Commissioner Roth is saying that you could build the exact Fairfield Inn, that building, just on a larger lot, and you would have more parking or landscaping on the lot taking up the empty space.
And I'm not sure I'd want every property between, what do you want to call it, Jade Street, Bromer, and the railroad tracks, be Fairfield Inns.
But I understand you don't want all of them to do that, but what you're saying is none of them can do that. That's what you're saying by limiting it to less than it is. You're saying that none of it can't have another one.
I'm just trying to help with ideas here. If you want to do what Commissioner Smith is saying without having it be everyone, you could keep that right-hand column but lower all the numbers. So you would lower we're talking right now about the community commercial line. You might lower the community commercial line to 1.0 in what's baseline allowed, but have that third column that would be at either the say 2.0 or 1 point, so that you would have something that you could go up to on a case-by-case basis if there were benefit and if there were found to not be contradicting issues like we've already got 4 of them. So that another way to do this, rather than my first proposal, would be keep all 3 columns but lower the numbers in each column for the regional and community commercial down by about 0.5, so that you have this notion of just lowering it relative to the proposal.
I like your first proposal better because I think the increased FAR allowance column, basically it says, if you don't like what we've got here, no, try this one. Let's make it a little bigger. It just allows that.
But Commissioner Smith's point is, we've already done that in times when we didn't even have the ability. We shouldn't have had the ability to do it.
Right.
So we do it already.
But hopefully we won't do it in the future.
I don't think
So
that's
I know it's late.
I don't think it's realistic.
I think if you'd like, and I can help you to do it, I think I would suggest that one of you make a motion of one of the 2 things I've suggested, and you put it to a straw vote, and I can help you to state it for the record. And then if that passes, you're done, and if it fails, then you can try another one.
Thank God for you, or we'll be here till midnight.
Okay, want me to try the
I'm
first one?
with the straw vote. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try the first one. Then on the issue of the floor area ratio, I would propose, or I would move that the increased FAR allowance column be eliminated, that the regional commercial proposed FAR be reduced to 1.5, and the community commercial proposed FAR be reduced to 1.0.
Is there a second?
And your motion did not include a 3 in the right-hand column
I
for the
said that
village.
column is eliminated.
That column's eliminated altogether.
He liked your first.
Basically, it was your first.
Yeah. Okay, just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion. We first talked about the village being special, and I want my comments before, please don't misconstrue them, because I'd like to see a hotel there. I just believe that it's got to be scale and size and a whole lot of other things. They're going to have to find off-site parking, a whole bunch of other things that come out in the zoning ordinance. But I'm still toying with the idea of maybe increasing the proposed FAR for that, and it may seem to me that 2.5 or something like that would work there and give them the opportunity that we're not saying no to that type of development on that particular property.
So would you like me to amend my motion to that?
I'd love to see that,
Okay,
because I think it'd work better.
I'll amend my motion to include the village mixed-use proposed FAR at 2.5.
So that's in the middle column. You still don't
I'll
have a right-hand
second his
column.
amendment.
So the middle column is 2.5 on the village.
1.0 stays.
1.0 stays.
Right.
2 goes to 1.5. 1.5 goes to 1. The other
And the
2
rest stay the same.
Right.
And the third column is still eliminated.
Eliminated.
All right. So we have
Could I ask for one other friendly amendment before you do the straw poll? And that is for regional commercial to go to an increased FAR from 1.5 to 2.0.
What it is now?
No, so the regional commercial would read, the proposed FAR would be 1.5, which is what you're suggesting, And the increase for the third column would be a 2.0.
No, my
So
motion
his
doesn't have a
motion
third
was
column.
eliminated.
His motion doesn't have a third column.
Well, except we just gave a motion for the third column
No.
for the
No,
mixed.
no, mine was
That
for
was
the second
proposed
column.
FAR. That was proposed FAR.
Oh, so you've raised the proposed FAR for village mixed use to 2.5?
Yes.
Excuse me, I
That's what
said
I
corrected.
did.
And no way you're going to consider taking regional commercial to 2?
I don't have a third column in my vision.
Linda, I wish you could have been here for that economic summit, and you'd really, the guy absolutely recommended against the 3.0, or didn't say it in those terms, but really didn't think that it would help at all out there to do.
I'm looking at the 2.0. I'm looking at the Fairfield end.
Well,
So,
that's community commercial. That's not in the regional commercial.
I thought it was
I don't really
regional
know if that's
commercial.
what he said.
Anything past,
I don't know if that's what he really said.
well,
I think what he was saying was that the big, huge, massive malls are dead. But I think if you were to look at, what's the FAR at Santana Row?
I'm not talking about the mall.
I don't know,
I'm
but
talking about the
significantly higher.
mixed-use development.
Right, and I'm talking about the mixed use.
Yeah. I would guess that the FAR at Santana Row is around 2. I don't know it
Yeah.
offhand.
Big piece of property.
Okay, so the motion stands, single column, 2.5, 1.0, 1.5, 1.0, 0.5, and 0.5.
Got it.
Yeah, all right, that's the motion, and there is a second on that motion.
Yes.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
Okay, so.
Chairperson Ortiz, because it's not a unanimous vote, we need to do a roll call vote.
Okay.
So Commissioner Welch,
That's right.
No.
That stupid thing.
Commissioner Graves.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
No.
and Commissioner Ruth,
Aye.
Chairperson Ortiz.
No. So the motion failed. Do we have another motion?
I agree with Mick, and I understand Mick's concern about who's going to do what in the future, and I could agree with the proposed FARs that Mick mentioned to lower the regional to 1.5 and the commercial to 1.0, and then add the third column and keep those, lower those down also, regional commercial at 3.0 and then community commercial at 2.0.
Basically the second, it was your second.
It's essentially my second
Right.
idea, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a compromise. Again, it's got to come back to the planning commission and then to the city council before it gets that far, and I understand what's happened in the past, but I think
But I
it has
don't
to be-
see that as a compromise. What I see it as is a developer comes in and he goes to staff and he says that the second column has this in it, but if you really don't like that developer, here's this third column. Do we really want the third column? No.
But that's what we live by. We do live by that. I mean, we just
And
did
that's
it.
what-
We just did
that's
it
right.
tonight.
That's right.
Yes,
Where did we do it
just
tonight?
did it.
We just did it. We want to do it. Clearly, we've always done it. We want to have the ability to do it
Where did we do it tonight? I'm sorry.
with the theater.
The 50-foot architectural feature.
No, that's a variance to height.
but now
That's
we're
a
talking-
zoning rule.
But what
it's,
happens
it's
is
a,
we're
it's a
timing.
mindset. It's what we
But
do.
this is, the difference between this and a zoning ordinance is that the zoning ordinance comes after this. And it has to have a touch with reality for this because supposedly we're setting boundaries. And if you have two sets of boundaries, if I were a developer, I'd always take the highest boundary. Why would you take a lower one?
I have a question for staff. So we have similarly a kind of an odd thing with the height restrictions in the village and the Capitola. So it's 25 feet. However, the planning commission at their discretion go to 27 feet. It's not even really a variance. Is that correct?
That's
Right, it's an
variance to the
exception.
zoning.
It's an exception. So it's not a variance. But in this situation, once we adopt this in the general plan, if we push something like this through, then do we have the opportunity within the zoning ordinance to say that it would have to be a variance to go to that height, or something similar to the heights?
No, there's nothing you can write in the zoning ordinance to give you flexibility with the general plan.
Well, I guess I'm not asking for flexibility. I'm saying to say the proposed floor area ratio is what is acceptable. If you go above that, we have latitude to do that, but it requires a variance or some
Well,
other.
what it's going to require is a set of findings that are already written into the draft general plan that have to do, for instance, with finding greater community benefit, being able to maintain that 100-foot setback, and there's a series of things that are in the general plan in that regard. So they're already in there, and you would have to, whoever the planning commission is at the time would have to make that set of findings that you are consistent with that set of criteria in order to allow going to that higher FAR.
So then it goes back to mixed concerns like our plan development where it just allows that flexibility.
And I think that 100-foot setback thing is a little scary too, and that we are going to end up with exactly the kind of thing that this consultant was telling us is sort of a dead in the water kind of building for today. That, you know, it's just not it's not today's building what people want. They want it spread out all over the property. They want to stroll, and what that condition would do is shove all of it right up to the front, which is really what people don't want anymore.
About 1066 41st Avenue.
Don't know.
Madam Chair, did I have a motion? I can't remember. Was that actually a motion I made, or was that just a
You were discussing.
I think it was a discussion. Was it a motion? If you say it was
well,
a motion.
you know what? I
A
think
motion?
I'll throw it out there as a motion, and maybe I need to go back over that. But the motion would be that we keep the 3 columns. We lower the regional commercial proposed FAR to 1.5, the increased FAR to 2.5, community commercial to 1.0 proposed and increased to 2.0.
So I just want to know if I heard you right. So it would read 2.0, 3.0, 1.0 NA, 1.5, 2.5?
Correct. 2.5.
2.0?
2.2, 1.5 and 2.5.
So they're each reduced by 0.5.
Right.
So the third line reads 1.5 and 2.5, and the fourth line would read 1.0 and 2.0. Those 4 numbers are all reduced by 0.5 each.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
So question, does that reflect exactly your second?
I think yes. I mean, my second idea was
This was a
kind
little
of
lower
vague,
than that,
but
wasn't it?
I might have at one point said a little lower, but I'm very comfortable with this, and I actually don't recall what I said before.
I recall what he said, and it was
It was lower.
2.0.
And I hate to sound cynical, but I will.
Yeah, I can live with it. You mean you can live with TJ's or
I
a
can live
little
with
lower?
TJ's, or I can live with
a little lower than that.
the village mixed use third column being 2.5, the regional commercial column being 2.0, and the community commercial third column being 2.0. I could live with those numbers as well.
Now, I said, I'll be a little cynical, because I don't think it matters what we do, because I think the council's going to do whatever they want to do.
Oh, of course.
And what our recommendation is just not even going to be listened to.
I know.
That's my guess.
I know.
But that's no reason for us not to give them
Right.
the best recommendation that
Right.
we can give them.
Absolutely.
And they can take it, but if they know we're just going to give them something,
TJ, can you live with
they're
that
going to
amendment?
ignore it, then they're not going to.
Is it keeping the 3rd row or not?
It's keeping the third row, but it's going down on a couple of the columns another 0.5%.
Okay. I can live with that.
All right, so we've got a little bit of a consensus here. We're going to reiterate. So it'll be 2 and 3,
On the
1
village
and
mixed use.
NA,
Okay.
1.5 and 2,
Right.
1 and 1.5,
Correct.
and the rest, okay? And is there, that is the amended motion. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Welch,
Yes.
Commissioner Graves,
No.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruth,
No.
Chairperson Ortiz.
Yes.
Haha, you got to go.
Yay, good job, good job.
You guys are a
Staff.
good team, actually. It's not
That's one of the
midnight
few
yet.
split votes we've ever had.
Yeah, it's true.
No, it was a difficult issue. I mean, I think
is.
we really tried to figure out some way to approach it, and
Well, we beat this up in
so-
our joint meeting, so you're going to have the same discussion at the planning commission,
Yeah,
or
and
the city council. I'm sorry.
Nick's right. Whatever we said is not going to stand, so.
But I would like to make one more comment before we get off this completely, and that is that I wanted to commend you guys for the thorough job. I went through as best I could the discussions that we had in the joint meeting and the comments that got made from the record that you have. You have a really thorough record. I couldn't find very many comments that were made that didn't get incorporated in some way or another. And the mitigation measures were forward-looking, they were creative. we're probably doing more to mitigate some of this stuff than any of our neighbors in a lot of the coastal communities. And I think you guys have done a heck of a good job at vetting it, pulling together as much of the community as you could. And I think the lack of responses is not because people are apathetic out there, but because you listened and you churned, and I think we've got a really good product. So
I agree. And furthermore, you inherited it, which,
Yeah.
you know, and the process has been long. So 2010, that surprised me.
And you had a new baby all along with it,
Yeah.
so what can you say?
Well, good job, all staff, all the way around. So we've got that vote. Did you need anything else?
We do need a recommendation on adoption and certification of the environmental impact report.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Is it with the proposed change that we just?
That, we'll present that as a separate recommendation. We'll present the issue much as we did tonight and offer the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Okay.
Is that a motion? Is that okay was a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Unanimous.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, on to the director's report.
I'm exhausted. No.
All right.
Nothing. You got nothing for us?
No, nothing.
Okay, then.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners, anything? I see the open streets up here, a little notice for our open streets. For those of you listening at home, we've got a very cool thing happening for the first time in Capitola on Sunday, May 4th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., Capitola Village Esplanade. There will be a walk, bike, play in a car-free street zone all that day. There'll be free activities, music. Everybody's going to be out there whooping it up to celebrate healthy communities and clean oceans. So put it on your calendar. I think it's going to be fun.
Can I ask you this? Did they take this car-free day to the Coastal Commission, and did they run it by the disabled rules?
They did. I know they did discuss the disabled rules at the meeting.
I'm just asking, because I know they didn't.
Is that
No
meeting
comment
adjourned?
from staff, I see. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.